Today we are talking about art with Miss Aurora from Flying Rainbow Lasagna. So this topic came up very naturally with the rise of AI infiltrating art in every corner of the visual and even auditory realm. And I know, Aurora, you are a very consummate visionary artist who has had her own journey on discovering what art is on this earth and how to execute your own vision. And for the viewers that don't know, Aurora has this gorgeous art book that I luckily have a copy of. It's called Aurora, the Flying Rainbow Lasagna Visionary Artwork, which this book depicts all aspects of the higher realm realities and different aspects of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. So with that, I will ask my first question to Miss Aurora. What does the word art mean to you, and how does AI affect human beings as artists?
All right. So I want to be like, prepare for incoming rant, everyone, because I'm not going to hold back. So the first part of the question about what is art, and also to contextualize this, like you guys know, I'm a cultural outsider. And when I came here to this world over 20 years ago, I had to really learn about what is art within this culture. Because, where I come from in more of what you would call like an otherworldly place or an angelic realm, like we experience our creative activity and contextualize it very differently. So I had to educate myself in this world about all sorts of communication in order to get across the truthfulness of what I see with my inner vision. So my job is being a visionary artist, and that means that I have an inner vision and I want to translate it faithfully and share it with people. So this is even about like why I'm in the art field, because I initially did kind of a survey of all the different types of communication and professions that are here in your world. And I realized that, like to be a scientist, you have to get the approval of other people around you. And to do certain other professions, literally to be a professor in academia, you have to get all sorts of accreditations and approval of people around you. But art was the one place where you could have a job where you could be like, you don't have to have the approval of the people around you to be able to bring your message. So as a place of a platform of totally pure self-expression. So that was why I really gravitated to art as a way for me to be able to share these ideas. And my definition of art as a distillation of my perspective coming from an otherworldly place, plus how everyone does it on the surface of Earth in this here and now, is that art is something that is an expression of the artist. Like it's a form of self-expression, a form of communication of inner truth, and that it is done for symbolic meaning and profundity, and its purpose is its existence, as opposed to a utilitarian object, like my pen writes stuff down. It is not an object of art. Or my glass holds water. It is not an object of art, even though clearly like this is beautifully crafted and beautifully made, but it has a purpose that is beyond just its formfulness or the message that it carries. And so I gravitated into art because I realized that that was a place where if you can get across the concept to other people, like this is an art object, people look into it and they try to make sense of it. The idea is that artists put meaning into the art objects that we create. The art objects are not random, and they are not, capricious or in any way, meaningless, that they're very much on purpose. And I joked also with you, Lanley, about, initially showing my art projects and things in the very early stages when I first came here, and people not comprehending them because my presentation wasn't correct, because you really have to put art in a frame. So this culture, I learned, makes a distinction between regular everyday stuff and junk versus art. This is different from where I come from. That's why I had to learn about this. But the regular everyday stuff and junk, that could be like a gum wrapper, nonsense, lottery ticket, right? Everything's all crumpled up. It looks like garbage. But if you put it in a frame, then that very same like crumpled up gum wrapper can be looked at as, a deep, meaningful statement on reality, or a pedestal. If you just have like whatever, a crumpled up soda can on the ground, no one will look at it, but put it on a pedestal in a museum or in a gallery context, and people will say, that is something. That's not just junk, it's something, and it's there for a purpose. Okay. So that is why I started to learn how to express my truth through art in choosing materials, because like again, not everything is considered an art material. Like paint is considered an art material, but whatever, like elbow macaroni is not necessarily considered an art material. So you have to make the art out of stuff that is accepted in this world and present it in the correct way in order to be perceived and received correctly. All right. And art is also something that is an expression of the individual's soul and has to do with a person's experience of moving through time. So even before AI art, I have a lot of high standards about reproducing art and original art because, again, where I come from and in places where you will experience at some point too, when people are multidimensional and you can read an object, when you look at an original painting, you're not just looking at the surface image of that paint. You're really looking at every layer of energy that was involved in the making of that object. Same thing if you had like an item of clothing, like if someone sewed, whatever, a pair of pants, you would know everything about who the person was, what they were feeling, how many, efforts they had to make on that day to make the pair of pants. Like it's the same for everything. That's why the edges of what is art and what is not art blur when you start to get into this multidimensional expression. You just become art and everything is art everywhere, but you are not there yet. So in this world, you have certain levels of special objects that are art. And when you are multidimensional and you can read those objects with your inner eye, you can feel everything that an artist put into that piece. And I say that in your world, some collectors are good at doing this. It might be intuitive or unspoken for them, but you go into a room full of all sorts of art and they will magnetize to a particular piece. What is it about that piece? In art language, some people will say, it speaks to me. I think that on a more energetically articulate level, we could say that there's something about what the artist was feeling in the moment of creating and generating that piece of artwork that remains as an energetic or emotional echo or like a residue that the viewer can then feel, tune in on, and can be valuable. That's the value of original art. So it's not just that someone like Vincent van Gogh had a limited lifespan and painted a limited number of canvases, and therefore they're worth a lot of money because there's only a limited number of them. Like that's from the commodification aspect of art, as there's people parasiting on top of the great energy of the original artist. But the real value of being in the presence of an original Van Gogh is that you have an object connection to that guy and to his feelings. The art object becomes a portal, like through time and space, through which you, the viewer, can tune in on who that man was and what he felt and what his struggles were and why he made things look the way he look, why he made them look the way they look, and what it meant to him. And everything about my artistic output in this world has been done with that meaning, with that intention in mind, that if I were not here as I am now to speak about my art pieces with my flapping of my moving mouth parts and say, this is what this is about, this is what red means, and this is what this shape means, this is what this means, that I would put layers of intentional communication energy and significance into the imagery that I was creating, that a person could come days, weeks, months, or years later and feel and sense everything that I put into those pieces. And that's the value of the original piece. So you did a beautiful job at holding up that art book. Thank you very much for showing that to everyone. And that is an example of reproduction. It's a self-published book, and also my dress, same painting. And you can't see it because the lighting isn't that good right now, but it's that same painting on the wall right back there, right? So what is the difference between that painting and this dress and that art book? The dress and the book are good. They're not bad, wrong, or evil in any way. They are valuable in that they make these images accessible. Not everybody can travel here to my home studio and look at this painting on the wall. And so having a book that can travel through the mail and that people can look at and experience what I created in terms of the image is very valuable and good. And same thing with something like a dress. This is like a small, affordable reproduction of the original piece that I made that a person can have in their life and they can get inspired by it. And it's true, it's not imbued with every single layer of profundity that the original is, but it's still something that is valuable to have for people to have in their life. But I wouldn't say that let's compare and contrast. The dress or the book cannot take the place of the original piece of artwork. And the original piece of artwork is important in terms of myself as an artist. I learned and grew during the process of that painting. So I started out, I learned about the intellectual patterns of putting them together. And I learned also the same way that you learn when you're like a child learning your ABCs. How many times did you write the letters ABC? Many, many times. And you wrote it so many times, you have a muscle memory of what that feels like. I painted these circles and made these formful shapes in that painting so much that I internalized them. In many ways, the painting by hand of my work means that my paintings live inside of me, that I can remember every single time that I made these circles. So it's not just like my feelings in the moment, but it's everything that I contain inside of me. I can make a faithful reproduction of every painting I've ever done because I did it all by hand. That is very different to distinguish it from something that's, let's say, a fractal image that is generated by computers. We haven't even hit AI yet. I'm like, strap yourselves in. We haven't even hit my rant on AI yet. We're still working on, like, let's say 15 years ago, when fractal generating computer programs were all the rage and they were starting to become very available to people. And all you had to do was input some parameters and move some sliders on the screen, and it would make these beautiful images, similar to what I do, but totally worlds away in terms of the intention and the levels of information that they contain. And I started to notice that my hand-drawn stuff was getting a little bit lost in the mix of items that were computer generated. And it's not just mere snobbery here. There's a real reason for why I elevate something that is made by hand as opposed to something that is computer generated. Because if you computer generate something, it's like taking a wonderful shortcut. Just add this, and this, press go on the computer, and the computer pops out an image that can then go to your printer. And it bypasses you completely. Like it took me over a year to paint that painting. Some of my paintings take a very long time when it comes down to the many multiple drawings and color studies that I do. And I do a lot of staring at it. I call it sit and stare, where I will just literally, be in my studio, sometimes with music on, staring at this painting and figuring out, like, with visual kind of puzzle piece movements, imagining with my brain how things fit together and how they should look and all sorts of things like that. That's a very, very long, complex inner neurological process to be able to then externalize a piece of art. Just doing it with the computer in 5 seconds is a very, very different experience. And that type of artwork and image generation, I should say, then became very accessible, quick and disposable. And then you can print it on a yoga bag, of this, of that, all these different things. And I started to realize, like, okay, like, it's nice to have beginners can have fun with doing this, but it's not the same as the art that I do. And I had to start to make a distinction. So that was when human operators were creating computer generated, polygon, sacred geometry, and fractal based imagery, but it's not really artwork. I'm sorry. But then now we get to your real question. AI. And AI does not even require a human to run sliders or make color choices or other design choices in terms of creating imagery. It just creates imagery. And, sometimes there's a human who will prompt the computer and say, like, I want a picture of a fluffy cat, on top of a mushroom, holding an umbrella with whatever, rainbow Skittles raining down. And then the AI will create that for you. So this is, to me, this is not art. And why is it not art? I mean, it is an expression of a person. In some ways, yes, because you're saying, I want the picture of the fluffy kitten, but it does not utilize the human's visual pathways and hand-eye coordination. So let me, before I rant about AI, rewind in time and go back in time before the invention of the photograph. Before photographs were invented, all you had were artists. If you wanted a portrait of a place or a person, there was no shortcut to be able to be like, "How, take a quick snapshot," and then you can go like, "Hey, have you seen this person? They look exactly like this." If you need a picture of a person's face, you got to get the artist to see the person's face, and the artist has to be the translator to make a two-dimensional image that looks like a person's face. Same thing with going to a place. There's a whole art movement from the late 1700s, early 1800s, from the Hudson Valley, which is upstate New York on the east coast of the United States. When all of these explorers started to move there from Northern Europe and explore the place, they were all like, "I'm going to start painting pictures of this place so I can send them back to Europe and show everyone what this place looks like." They created a whole school of art just based on making these faithful reproductions of this new, environment that everyone was exploring. And they idealized it somewhat, but they were actually relatively accurate in what they did. All right. When photographs were invented and became more widely available, the job of the artist totally changed. And it used to be that imagery was incredibly valuable. Having a picture of a person was a special thing. Oh my goodness. So like if you had a mother or a lover and you want to remember their face forever, like you would have someone painted or maybe engraved in a locket, but very, very valuable and special. But contrast that with your life now. Everyone lives in a world that is full of photography. Lanley, I know you're a photographer. Photography is ubiquitous. It's so much a part of our life. And we've got pictures of everyone, our loved ones, our pets, my drink that I drank for breakfast in the morning. Like we take pictures of everything, especially now that you're not limited by film. So some people can even, old relics from a previous century, can even remember what it was like when we had film cameras. And then you didn't just take pictures of anything. And it also took you 2 weeks to get the film actually developed. But then once, they started to invent digital photography, and you didn't have the expense of film and the expense of developing it, right? Then you can take a picture of anything. You're like, oh, like this is a nice breakfast bowl. I'll take a picture of my breakfast bowl, like anything, and then be able to document your life much, much more. So all of this, in order for me to get across to humanity, the sense that imagery went from being something that is very rare, unique, priceless, and special, and maybe even only for the wealthy, into being much more egalitarian, proletariat, part of your world. Imagery is everywhere, imagery being very, very disposable. So imagery and photographs taking the specialness away from something that is a picture of something. And this is all having to do with like human neurological, whatever, recalculation. Like you're always leveling up. When photographs were first invented, like people, they didn't see images all the time. Like you went to a museum to see images. You did not see them. Now you have your phone or your computer and you see imagery all the time. It is a unique and special thing. And I'm focusing mostly on visual arts, but this does relate also to music. When music started to become recorded, music in Walkman and portable players and things like that, all of a sudden now you can have music all the time and you can have music anywhere, and music is for the masses. All of this has been a part of the cultural shift. All right. So ordinarily I'd be like, hooray, I'm an artist. I celebrate more art and more music everywhere. But with the overabundance of these expressions, there also came a dilution, making the message not as focused, the quality not as good, and also the viewer not as attentive, because all of a sudden these images become very disposable, not very important. And then when we start to get into things that are like Photoshop and outright computer generated imagery, like animations that were not created by humans, then there is less of a connect. So you're already disconnecting from the sacredness of imagery. And then once you get to the point in technology where a computer is either photoshopping or generating something, originally, this is still years ago, then people connected to it less. There was less of a connection in your heart, less of a punch to the gut when you look at something. Because it used to be like if let's say you're a photojournalist, you take a picture of something with blood spurting, right? Like a disturbing image. And people look at that, it's punched to the gut because they're like, wow, like that really happened. But once Photoshop was invented and became more prolific, then everyone is like, oh, look, spurting blood. It's fake. It's fake. It's fake. It's fake. And then the impact of the image has really gone away. And now we have fully computer generated images, fully computer generated videos, which have much less of a connection to the viewer because almost everybody has checked out because they're like, that means nothing. It is Photoshop. It is staged. It is a pastiche of putting things together. Okay. And even that Photoshop and that rant, that's pre-AI because it still meant somebody had to click a mouse somewhere. Somebody had to move pixels somewhere. A human did something to make this happen, right? But now, over the past couple of years, we're in the realm of computer-generated artwork that I am so anti this artwork in quotes that when if I have a Facebook friend and they're going to share some AI generated image, which you can kind of tell at this point that it is, I X them out. I'm a snooze for 30 days. I don't want to see you for 30 days. That's your punishment for showing AI stuff to me. Because why? Why am I so vehemently, I'm like allergic. I'm inflamed in the presence of this AI generated imagery because it doesn't express anything of the human soul. That when it comes down to it, art is about an expression of yourself and who you are in the world and what's important to you. And AI doesn't express anything that's about who or what you are as a human in the world. If it had a willpower, it would be the expression of what a machine mind is expressing, but it's dead. It's not alive. It is not, it doesn't have a self to express. So you have emptiness expressing its emptiness through the milieu of pixels. And what is distressing to me is when people's eyes eat those pixels, that's like eating junk food. And then they fill up on the junk food, and then they don't have any room for their real nourishing fruits and vegetables inside, which is the real art that they should be eating. So that's been a real problem over the past several years, that there are many wonderful flesh and blood human beings who want to have a job being an artist, get paid and get celebrated in their communities for what they can do, and they can paint and draw a thing, and they are not only not being hired, and AI is being hired in their place, but then also the stuff that they make, that we make, that expresses deep truth in your soul, your purpose for being here on earth, gets marginalized and overlooked and scrolled past and thrown out the window because the focus is on junk food. That is that's a trashy situation. When we're in that situation, you're being given real nourishment. Like when artists make something, there is vulnerability there. An artist is like this, like, I painted this painting. Like, will you please look at it? I'm kind of put my soul on a canvas. And you want to hear something back from the person, you know, like you put yourself out there, you want to hear something back from the viewer. And what is happening instead is people are developing a rapport with an AI that, like, it doesn't care what you think or feel when you look at its painting. It doesn't have thoughts or feelings. It means nothing. It is meaningless nothingness. And the viewer connecting with that meaninglessness is not really having a conversation. So to put that into fewer words, art is not just about me as an artist generating something. It's also about the relationship that my art object has with viewer. And you are, or listener, you are viewer and listener. And it's about establishing that back and forth with you guys. And it doesn't mean that you pander to other people. Like if I made my painting, put my paint soul on a painting and showed it to you, and you were like, Aurora, I hate it, and it has far too much red in there. I should go like my shoulders go down, be like, okay, I'll make a new one with no more red. Like you can't do that as an artist. You have to keep on painting with your own standards. But you can hear that sometimes from someone else, like, oh, they did not enjoy this piece, and they, like art that looks different than my art. That's fine because eventually you keep going and you find your audience. But so you never pander to what other people are saying, but you need to have that feedback, even if sometimes it is negative feedback. And the AI has been killing that relationship as just the most recent chapter of an already ongoing distancing in relationship between artist and viewer. And now it's like divorce, like it's over. If you go with AI, that's it. You're out of my life. It's over between us. I'm joking.
Thank you, Aurora. Wow. So let's go back to the beginning. You mentioned that we are supposed to feel the energy of all the layers of the experience of the artist creating the piece. Is that something that you experience when you're looking at an original piece in a museum? Can you sense all of those energies and all those layers? And can you tell a difference between
Totally.
levels of authenticity or who that person was? Can you give us one specific experience of a piece that impacted you and walk us through that experience?
I don't have the name for the piece. It is not a famous piece, but I will say yes. I like good art collectors can tell what are the multidimensional pieces and what are the not good pieces. Like good art means it's multidimensional and it's really not about whether it's a pretty painting or whether it has a big price tag. It has to do with how many beautiful, accurate layers of themselves are involved in the time structure of the creation of that art piece. So when I look at people's paintings and drawings of human beings, that is when I mostly can tell whether something is good or not good. Again, it's not about whether it captures an accurate likeness. Like, is it photorealistic? Some photorealistic portraits and still lifes, I think, are bad art, even though they might look exactly like a photo. You're like skeptical, like, why? Why is this, Aurora? And the answer is because they painted from a photograph. And the whole entire thing feels flat and processed to me. So when you paint from a photograph, it's a reference photograph instead of painting from the live model. The camera has already done the job of taking something that's a three-dimensional formfulness that has, length, width, and height and depth, and turning it into something that has a flat image. Then you have that flat image, a little picture, and you have it on the edge of your canvas. And essentially all you're doing is paint by numbers. All that you have to do is create a grid and map the colors and the shapes that have been created on this two-dimensional structure onto your larger two-dimensional structure. And boom, you've got a painting. And people make whole careers out of photorealistic renderings of still lifes that I feel are very dead and very flat. And when you're a good portrait artist, what you do is you don't just paint this surface of what a person's face or body looks like. You begin with a comprehensive understanding of what their anatomy is. So if you're a good artist, you start off with kind of like a little sketch of a person's skeleton. And you're like, okay, like I'm not even looking at what a person's face looks like. I'm just looking at like how their head tilts on their neck and how their shoulders fit with their head and their neck and how that whole thing fits with their thorax. And you just kind of work with these basic forms. And then you start to bring in the personality of the model, the background and the environment of everything else around there, and the defining of the features of their face. And when you do that, sometimes you have a portrait of someone that doesn't even have like their eyelashes or, little tiny details on their face. It might not have everything like their eyebrows and their little tiny earring or whatever. But when you look at that Painting, you get a feel of that person. Like if you know that person in life and then you see this quick little gestural painting without, but you get it because you know why? It's the energy of that person. So to say it in better words, when you're an artist and you're a good artist doing a portrait, you have your live model, you internalize the energy of the live model. And then you translate that through all of your art, drawing, and anatomy training to be able to create a two-dimensional image of that model. But it's not about just mapping perfect details because you capture things about like maybe it's about their posture, like maybe they kind of sit in a way that's like this. And when you see that painting, you're like, that really looks like Joe Schmo. I know him. He always sits like this, or whatever. They're kind of like whatever is your body shape. That because you have internalized the energy signature of the person, and then put that into the canvas. And there is a value in doing that beyond the end result of the image. You become a translator of a person's energy and their feel. And it's not just about creating a photorealistic portrait of them. And it's more valuable than a photorealistic portrait because any dead stupid camera can just go like click. This is your mugshot. This is what you look like. We all agree that's what you look like, but it's different than what you feel like. So sometimes I look at paintings that are drawn or painted of a person and they never even did the skeleton underneath. They jumped directly to like the details, like the eyebrow and the earring. And I'm like, yep, that's a flat lifeless painting. I don't want to be mean to people, so I'm not going to say that to anyone. But some paintings capture the spark of a person and it really feels like them. And it's because artist started out with the underlying architecture of the person and then put the paint on top of that like skin. And these are rare at this point for people to do paintings like that because I don't know if they're even teaching those skills in art school at this time. Like art school has changed a lot since the invention of digital cameras, Photoshop. All of these things have changed because they've changed the way that art students are taught to make artwork because a lot of university guidance it's focused on get a job, kid. And you're already like trying to be an artist, and your parents are like, I'm paying a lot of money for you to get this degree. You better get a job, kid. So they're like, okay, like, look, here is how you make a face that looks like a face. Get a job, kid, right? But that is a different focus than the focus on bringing forward a person's voice through visual symbols. And when you go to that type of an art school, first of all, you're not going to get a job, kid. Just face it. You have to make your own job. You're not going to be like, hooray, I have learned how to externalize my internal presence in the world. Now you will pay me for it. Like, that's it. That's all changed. And I can rant all about how the art world has changed and galleries have changed and Instagram's effect on art and things like that. But schools are often focused on getting you proficient with basic skills that can help you in the workplace, but not necessarily about what it is to be successful as an artist. And when you're successful as an artist, you are a really good translator for the truth of the world that you see around you into something that is an art object that speaks without words.
Wow, that's a lot. So, from what I'm hearing, a good artist is able to, through their own filter, absorb the energy and use the energy of the truth around them, and then use their skills to put that onto a medium of their choice. And today, it seems like what people find as impressive is more so leaning on the skills or ideas aspect, and not just okay, they embodied someone's spirit or the spirit of something. Because when you scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, this is like doom scrolling generation, it kind of takes away from that ability to process and receive those energies, or to even think that that is something you're supposed to be feeling. And then you kind of assess everything visually, right? Like is this attractive? Do I like it? And I think maybe the misunderstanding of what art is has everyone seeing it from a subjective place. Like, okay, do I like this? You know, like we're groomed to heart something, like, or do we dislike it? Versus, is this truth from someone's authentic lens? So I think we've got like two parties here, right?
Definitely. And let's talk about the doom scroll, because that is really not the way that we traditionally share art imagery in elevated art realms. So the traditional way of sharing any kind of either painting or sculpture is to present the object piece and then you have white space around it. Like, why are galleries always these plain white boxes? And why is the art spaced so far apart? Because you're supposed to just soak in that particular piece. And you're supposed to spend some time with it. This whole thing of kind of like, here's a picture, picture. That's the junk food thing. That's like potato chip, chomp, 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 chomp. It's very much like the Pac-Man. I know that's an old, dated reference, but just chomping away at more and more and more art. And it kind of demeans it. It kind of treats it like junk food. So this is big because you can have a really amazing original art piece. And when you go to a gallery and you see it in person, it glows, it vibrates, it speaks to you. It has a deep, powerful impact, punch to the gut, or sometimes more nicely, just like a feeling in your heart over here. And when you look at something that is pixels on a screen, or something that's, made into a little, like whatever, 3 inch by 3 inch square to fit on your phone, there's a lot that is lost in not only taking the size and shrinking it down, but the colors, the vibrancy of it, and the profound impact of seeing it, surrounded by white in a room. And also, sometimes the form of the little phone artificially elevates things that would be lost and really aren't that valuable and valuable enough to put in a big giant room in a gallery. You got it? So like, whatever, sometimes people might take a very super close-up shot of them doing something, like maybe, writing with calligraphy, gold ink or something like that. And it's certainly cool to look at. You're like, wow, look, like they just drew a letter with gold ink, and that's cool. But that is not art. But it is cool to see how pens and ink work and how they look. But some people make a whole Instagram life self-expression, you know what I mean? Like they're getting paid maybe by making videos of them just doing these calligraphies. So the intimacy of calligraphy and the ability to share that intimate moment with your audience on a larger scale on someplace like Instagram or social media elevates that act when that act is actually below mediocre. That's not art. Calligraphy is not fine art. Calligraphy has a utility. It is a decorative way of creating words that have importance, that you put it on the envelope at your wedding so people know like where to send the thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's not your wedding envelope is not art. It has a meaning and a purpose. It is mail. It is mail. Like, in your mailbox. It is not art. And again, if you're a calligrapher, I want you to share your gifts with the world. I don't want this to sound like I'm diminishing calligraphers, but a person, what is out of balance is that some people can be professionally elevated by creating small, essentially disposable pieces and sharing the videos of those small disposable pieces for I want to say, hungry mouth of Instagram. Because Instagram is endlessly hungry. It's like, I need content. And then it will put all these videos out there. So Instagram doesn't care whether it's good or whether it's bad or what it's doing to the art world. It just cares that there's something new that's going to be another potato chip for someone to eat, another image for someone to look at. So, because in previous years, like if you didn't have Instagram and you went to a gallery and you saw like just whatever, like there's some gold letters written on a card or whatever in a white space, like this is not very impressive. Like this is just some letters written. But when there is a super close up of it and how the person is creating it with a pen or a brush, it is more impressive. So what's the difference between those two things? Like, the camera has a lot to do with it. Like when this is from marketing and advertising now, like a lot of how people are trained as a viewer has to do with your relationship to marketing and advertising. That is where some of the best lenses for photography and video are used in your world right now, not for fine art, but for selling stuff. And it could be breakfast cereal. Like breakfast cereal is being photographed in super slow motion, and like the Captain Crunch is cascading out of the box and it's going down into the bowl and splashes of milk are going on top of it. And it's like the most voluptuous picture of breakfast cereal. Like it means nothing, but the picture is like gushing forward. And so I think that people got very used to a huge amount of technological ability being lavished upon the creation and generation of images that have like zero importance and zero meaning. And yes, as I'm saying that, so I'm telepathic, someone out there is thinking, oh, like you mean like Hollywood? I'm like, yes, like Hollywood. If you think about the enormous budgets that used to be allocated for certain, I won't call them films, certain movie expressions that were very, unimpressive narrative structures, unimpressive character development, and things that were largely about explosions and, whatever graphic violence or sex or things like that. That also is a diminishment of art. And I'm not that much of a student of film and media, which I'm mostly about like, visual arts and music, but so that's why I haven't studied that much of like what are good movies and what are not good movies. But you definitely have a distinction between like this small group of movies that are considered to be artistic oeuvres, and then this large group of movies that are considered to be schlocky, expensive, but you got the job done and you ate your popcorn and money was made and whatever 2 hours went by, like an experience was had. The lavishing of budgets and lavishing of image creating technology on this large group of stories that are not, it ain't Shakespeare, kid. It ain't Shakespeare, kid. But your society got very used to putting a lot of resources behind stories like that. So the answer is not always the best thing or best person or best narrative gets elevated through being lavished with attention from technology. Sometimes it's small things that aren't meaningful, and sometimes it's merely things that serve the agenda of the particular regime that you are living under. But that's not what art is supposed to be. Art is supposed to be the cream always rises to the top because somebody is doing a masterful job. And when you make something that is really good, it is undeniable. So Captain Crunch cascading into a bowl is not deep, meaningful art. But when you look at art that is really deep and meaningful, there is no question, there is no argument. You feel it inside. And a lot of that feeling state and connection is severed when you're doing the doom scroll. Because there's almost no feelings when people are looking at the internet. Like there's shock and horror when you're like, amputation, scroll fast. Like something bad, something gross, scroll fast. But there's not that same sense of beautiful heart connection when something is very sincere and very well made. And I'm telling you, like when you see pieces in person that are, the artist is sincere, the object is well made, everything is well presented, it might be totally alien. It might be an alien experience to people that have only ever experienced art on social media. And I would encourage people to be able to experience art directly and not through the intermediary of the computer and social media. But now we're going to get into big social shifts happened with the way that viewers access art changed and shifted. It used to be that you would go to a public museum or private gallery. And it used to be that as an artist, all of the power was tied up in people that either, owned or curated museums or owned curated galleries. And everything that you did was to try to get their attention to apply to these two different, like gatekeepers, because they're tastemakers as well. They're not just gatekeepers, they're tastemakers. If the people that own and run the galleries and the museums, if they say, we do not like the color red, and if you are a monochromatic painter and you only paint red paintings, that's it. Like you're out the window. They're not going to put you in the museum or on their wall to be able to sell your stuff. And when home computers and the ability to create your own website started to be a trend in this world, initially I was very happy because I'm like, that is good for me as an independent artist. So I've not been represented or affiliated with a gallery. And I was able to make my own website and then put my artwork on the internet. And then if someone wanted to look at my pieces, of course, they couldn't see them in person, but they could see them in my virtual gallery. And that was a big leveling up. Of course, that was like 20 years ago, but that was a positive thing for anyone who was an artist who maybe painted something that was aesthetically not what was considered cool at the time. And I've never painted for the market and painted for pleasing a series of curators and hoping that they will think my stuff is cool. So yeah, and I mean, like, I will tell you also, like, girl, don't get me going, but there was a lot of schlocky stuff, within the past 2 decades that was like a trend. Maybe the trend was, something that whatever, like pop art that looked like cartoons or something. I was always like this. I was always like, that is not good. Like, why is that on a wall? It is not good. And the answer is because it was what was in style and because it was what people wanted to buy and because it was the gallery's choice to do that. Okay. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to make stuff like them because I think that that's schlocky. So I'm going to make my own stuff and put it up on my own website over here. Positive, good stuff. Well, the problem is that we started doing this so much that then the galleries stopped being afloat because they weren't selling stuff out of their storefronts. Pretty much just like many businesses had to change and upgrade due to e-commerce, like homewares. It used to be that if you needed something for your kitchen, you went to the local hardware store or the local homeware store and you bought whatever, your oven mitts or the things that you need. But at a certain point, online shopping became so easy and ubiquitous and fast that you're like, oh, I need some oven mitts. I'll just order it online. And that is why went out of business. Well, that's just for little things like oven mitts, but this definitely affected the world of fine art, where there were not enough sales that were being generated from physical gallery spaces, which are hugely expensive and very impractical to run. And so artists were no longer showing there. The whole gatekeeping system kind of fell and collapsed on itself because those guys were largely elevating themselves out of their own self-importance. And when no one was buying from them anymore, then they just kind of like didn't have the substance to continue to sustain themselves as a business. And then now what you've got is very few in-person galleries, very few opportunities to look at artwork that is original artwork with your physical eyes, and mostly artists representing themselves either through independent websites or through their Instagrams or some kind of an app or something like that. And now I don't think that it's very positive because you know why? Like, you guys see pieces in person. And also some pieces don't look that great on a screen, but they are amazing in person. And all of this has again taken away an aspect of specialness or diluted the profound impact that art can have on people. And now you end up just having like a commodity. Like, yep, like you can buy this thing that you see on your screen and it can show you what it will look like if you put it in your living room, or it can show you what it will look like printed on a scarf. But that is not the same as consuming imagery that an artist made for uplift. And I don't even know if they still have art walks where you guys live, but I've lived in lots of different art communities, and there used to be an art walk. Sometimes it was centered around the gallery downtown area, and you would have galleries that, you could go into, but also artists would put their easels and line stuff up on the sidewalk and you could just walk along and look at art. Like, no one does that anymore. And that they're like, no, of course not. I'm going to stand outside on the sidewalk and get pigeons pooping on my artwork and have to be cold. I'm going to be nice and warm inside, and you can scroll my stuff on Instagram. So there is a lack of direct connection, a lack of connection and cohesion as an artistic community, something that is overtly empowering also is disempowering and kind of makes more mediocrity than excellence, I feel. I know. I have a lot of negative things to say. I'm sorry.
It's accurate, so it's fine. Don't be sorry. You didn't create all of the degradation of the art world, right?
I
So you've
didn't.
been
And don't even,
explaining.
I haven't even told you about this bad sex and stuff going on in the art world. I haven't even told you about that. But no, I did not. I am not responsible for that. And I don't do those things.
Thank you. Okay, so you've talked about what art means to you, and what it is, your definition. Can you share more about the importance for authentic art and artists to exist in the community? So why is it important?
Yeah, if you don't have art, you pretty much don't have culture. Like it is possible to be alive, having just like food, air, and water, and performing your basic utilitarian tasks like work in a factory or drive a car or do a thing. But all of that is a very dead and automatic, automated society. Like when you look at every science fiction book or movie that's about a dystopia and a place where individuality has been eradicated and the spark of life and in uniqueness in each person has been diminished, those are places where there's like no art. Everybody lives in a place where there's nothing on the walls and there's no interesting colors on their clothing and there's nothing that is interesting or challenging to the eye. And it's just a very dead, mediocre existence. And I mean, you want to live in a world where there's art. Art is about not just only about meaning, but it is a sensory exploration. It is a food for your eyes. Like I told you guys, eating some images is like eating junk food, but what you should do is eat nutrition for your eyes. And that's what happens when you have intentionally created objects or landscapes around you that are beautiful and well balanced and make you feel uplifted and informed as an individual. And sometimes they're a part of your daily life, and sometimes they're not a part of your daily life. But when you don't have that in your society, it's like your society dies little by little. And I'm not the first person, the first cultural commentator to talk about this. The modern art movement, which would be considered post World War II, has been in many ways decried as a time of elevating the most um, low quality art and low quality viewpoints, even, things that are extremely banal and existential, whatever, ordinary objects placed on a pedestal as if they are art. And not very well crafted art pieces presented in terms of their imagery. We talk about Jackson Pollock. He just paint splatters. This is not the same as fine art, right? And that's after World War II. And a lot of people recognize that Jackson Pollock is a little bit of a psyop, meaning that he was artificially elevated into greater levels of popularity than he would have been if his profession had grown organically. There's some talk that this was even encouraged by the CIA and other agents of control trying to manipulate culture. And you might be like, well, Aurora, like, why does the CIA care about whether you have good art or bad art on the walls or any of these things? And the answer was really, it was a part of a multi-tiered approach to diminish the spirit of a time and make it harder for you to fight back. It's like a way of teaching you that art is dead, God is dead, life is meaningless. Don't fight back. Like just lay there like a fluoridated lump and don't do anything against the government. And there are many artists, I think, that owe their career to this attempt to kill art. Like they're not good artists, but they were put on the wall. And the thing that was always said was, well, a 5-year-old child, my kindergartner at home, can paint an image that looks just like this. Why is this art? And then you would have a whole lengthy professorial diatribe saying, well, this is art because of this and that, and this and this and this and this and this. But really, what it is establishing a cognitive dissonance between people who know like what is good and what is SHIT. All right. And they're looking at something and they're like, this is clearly doo-doo. This is clearly not impressive. But can someone else convince me that it doesn't taste like doo-doo and that it's actually chocolate ice cream and that I should actually like it and appreciate it. And unfortunately, most people got mind controlled to the point where they believed that doo-doos taste like chocolate ice cream. And then that percolates all the way through into academia. When you go to school and you learn in art school, so skills classes, technique classes are different than art history. They'll teach you like how to paint a face and how to paint a bowl of fruit. But then there's a different class where they will teach you about art history, where they will teach you what is good art. And a lot of their criteria for what is good art come directly from these think tank, thought experiment, mind control organizations that taught people to appreciate art that I feel has basically no merit. And I will criticize another famous guy. Hold on, I need to hydrate a little. Rothko. Rothko and the color field paintings. Oh, how I dislike. And I know some people, they love them. Some people are like this. They're like, oh no, they're not really that bad when you see them in person. And I'm like, oh my God. So, okay, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, color field paintings. That's just like a big, giant 12-foot tall canvas that might be painted blue or painted red. And most people are very unimpressed when the uninformed observer viewer looks at that. They're like, I can paint this. Like I painted the walls at home. I painted them whatever, ginger peach morning, and it was a slightly beige color. I'm Rothko. Look, I painted my breakfast nook, and that is true. Like there's no particular skill that is involved in this, and it is disheartening to see paintings such as that going for very, very big price tags. And that is really what started to happen post-World War II. It used to be only dead artists got big price tags. Then all of a sudden it became living artists that got big price tags. And they were living artists. They weren't making Fabergé eggs. If you guys know what I'm talking about, Fabergé eggs come from a jeweler who lived at the end of the 1800s in Russia and worked for the royalty there. And he made beautiful, amazing, like jewels and crowns and eggs and different things. And it could take a year to make something. Like it was slow and luxurious and like, anything that is a status symbol here and now, like a Rolex and the type of precision work that is put into that type of a fancy watch, right? So what you had then was very obvious artistry and craftsmanship to make something that is of high value. But when you got to the level of post-World War II and the color field paintings, you have something that takes very, very little skill to manufacture, being sold as if it is an artifact that took several years to make, like, some blown glass sculpture or very, fancy Fabergé egg or whatever. So these were actually tools for money laundering. And that's really the beginning of how you kill a society. Be like, yeah, no, this guy's a crap artist, but we're going to put his stuff in the gallery. We're going to slap $1 million price tag on it. And then that's going to be a way to transfer money between all of these incredibly wealthy and corrupt individuals. Once you start to see the art world through that lens, then it's not about the imagery or the journey of the artist anymore. So I had to learn about all of this. I came here from an angelic realm. We don't even lie where I come from. I had no concept of the art world being used as tokens for money laundering. I came here in 2001, okay? So I've been here for over 20 years, and I knew I was going to express myself through artwork in the very first 18 months that I came here. I learned about what it is to be an artist, and I started to do my drawings and my sketches. And I was so naive that I truly thought oh, yes, if you are a good artist, you simply apply to galleries and then begin to sell your artwork. They find that you are profitable and your professional life expands. And now you all might be laughing at home, how quaint to think that. It's like thinking that, whatever, elves cobble your shoes together and then you just wake up in the morning, or believing in Santa, believing in Santa. Yes, that was and then later on I learned oh, Santa does not exist. And this is all a den of corruption with people doing all sorts of naughty things for favors. You can imagine there's a lot of favoritism. Some of it is about sexual favors. Some of it is about careerism or nepotism, but a lot of it is just quid pro quo sexual favors in order for people to become elevated as an artist. But then when you get into the work of some overtly satanic artists, it's not just about sexual favors like quid pro quo slipping their way to the top. The artwork that is on the wall becomes a secondary image to the activity of either voluntary or non-voluntary sexual contact with a partner. That is what they're selling. They are selling the access to their bodies, and the artwork is meaningless on the wall. And once you get to that level of artwork being treated as a token for prostitution, then you have a dead society. You have like just a completely, when I say dead, like a husk. Like it's all the goodness and all the juices have gone out of your society. And then you just have this dead, shambling, like zombie shell that continues to churn along for a certain amount of time, but it does not have longevity. So I will tell you, there will be a future, and there will be future art museums. And there will be a whole wing of art museum in the future that will be called, sorry for me to say it so indelicately, but this will be the fellatio wing of the art museum. And they're like, yes, these are all of the paintings that were made in order to represent these sexual activities, and not from an artist that truly cared about the work that they were doing. It was really just a token for some levels of prostitution. And then people will be like, huh, very uninteresting. Please show me the next wing. Then we'll be like, here's the next chapter of when people actually regained their sanity and they started making artwork again as something that is meaningful. Again, apologies for that brief, lighthearted trip into the future. The horrors.
This is an art rant, so anything goes.
Thank you.
So earlier you said that art should be beautiful, balanced, and create upliftment. Is that true in every case? Because not all art is like that. And then if so, I think we're still discussing what art means. Is it about sharing an authentic perspective or idea in someone's experience and mind? And also, how important is it in just sharing the idea versus also having the craftsmanship behind that? Because craftsmanship seems to be very important to you, which of course that it's much better than if someone just pushes a button in an AI text box and be
Yes.
like, create this. I'd like to know more about this because as someone who, yes, is a photographer, I don't have the painting skills yet to create all of my ideas. I do have very good Photoshop skills. But when AI came about, I was just like, wow, all these ideas I have in my head, I can finally use my Photoshop skills to piece all these images, these ideas together to create that vision, that world. So you were also very critical about that. So I would love to hear more about all of what I just said.
Yeah. So we have to talk, I think, about cultural standards of beauty. Cultural standards of beauty are very arbitrary, even in the sense of elevating the human form to be a constant subject of what art is. I'm very abstract, and it's because I come from an abstract realm where people don't look like a face with two eyes and a nose and a mouth. And when I came here, even in my naivete in looking at the art world and galleries and things like that, I was like, it's always flowers, figures, and fruit. Those are the three subject matter, like flowers, right? Like roses or something like that. Figures, and that is usually a human figure, often female, sometimes nude, sometimes, just a face. And then fruit. For some reason, these people really like to paint fruit. And I'm like, okay, like this is why I don't know why people do this, but these seem to be the things that are important. Then I learned like these are almost kind of like cultural shorthands because they're things that are taught in art school as being important subject matter. But people are not painting bowls of fruit because they feel deeply about, apples and bananas. They're like, I have a deep passion for fruit. Like it's because it's fun or easy or gives them something that is a fun job to do in terms of creating a still life. Like it has roundedness, like I can make roundness and shadow and highlights and things like that. But that is really different than having something to say. So we have to start to make a separation between like academic art that might be I can paint a bowl of fruit, or I can make a thing look like a thing, or paint a tablecloth that has, lace, or a jar of water with, flowers stuck in it, and I can make the whole thing look very true to life. But what are you trying to say with the choice of that subject matter? Like, what is important about flowers or fruit? I can say kind of comprehended, like, what is important about figures? It's that it's people. Like, if I were looking at your world and taking these as artifacts of your culture, we would, like a cultural anthropologist, be like, why did the people of this time and place make these images? And the answer would be because these people look like them. Like, there's a real um, motivation for people to externalize things that look like themselves, and then to see things that look like themselves on the wall, kind of reflecting back to themselves. In fact, if I do a little bit of a side rant, I will tell you that I really consider almost all art to be a self-portrait. Even my art that is mostly abstract and geometric or polygonal, when you look at this, you don't necessarily see a human face, but it is an external representation of my internal state. And when you are in my studio looking at my art pieces, you feel me, even though it doesn't look like a woman with two eyes and long hair and gold earrings. Like, it doesn't look like my physical face, but it feels like me. So we're starting to talk about identity and what artists are painting, even if they paint a picture of a person, and even if it is photorealistic, what they're almost always doing is expressing some aspect of their own self-identity. And what it is our job, in art, both sides have a job. The artist has a job in choosing subject matter and how they represent something. The viewer has a job in decoding what the artist presents. That you have a job when you look at a piece that is art or listen to it to be like, there is something more than just regular mundane imagery going on here. I got to work hard in order to figure this out. Just like if someone gives you a poetry, and I'm really bad with poetry, but if somebody gives you a poem and it says something like, the moon was like a rose, and you're like, okay, I have to work hard to figure this out because I know the moon is not red and it does not look like a flower. And what is this guy trying to say when he says that? You add extra layers of interpretation and meaning to be able to comprehend the non-literal use of language. God did the same thing with imagery. When people are expressing something, it comes out as their self-portrait. It comes out as their cultural viewpoint. It comes out as an emphasis of what they think is important. It comes out as a message to you that you need to interpret. So, when we look at galleries and museums, a lot of the time we see women presented as the subject matter of art, but often it is painted by a man. It's very out of balance. And cultural anthropologists would look at this and be like, why is that? Why was the female form and the female appearance elevated and valued so much, but not the female viewpoint of being the actual artist to make these forms? Why is that? And so then you can go into a whole thing and learn about men, how men look at the world, how men look at women's bodies, the buying and selling commodification of women's bodies throughout the years, and why they are considered beautiful. Okay. Now, when you get into my conception of what I think is art and what I think is beautiful, even independent of your culture, I think that your cultural beauty standards are very limited. And when we talk about what is beautiful in a painting, like, it's very different than what you consider to be a face that is beautiful enough to be on a fashion magazine or as an actor in a Hollywood movie. Those beauty standards are very limited and very rigid. And really, not only are they not inclusive, but sometimes they're really unhealthy too, because people do all sorts of artificial surgical transformations of their body to look like a face that is on a magazine. And in art, when we are painting what we consider beautiful, it's not always painting someone who has a face form that is gonna sell a lot of movies or whatever, the unlikely bosoms of a Playboy model. Like, it's not always like that. It is more about a person's spirit. Sometimes you see a beautiful portrait of a person that might be like whatever, a Native American elder, and they have really wrinkled skin. And they might also be wearing like traditional regalia or something else that speaks about who they are and what they've lived in their life. And then that's a way of saying we hold this as a sign of beauty. So beauty is not only the female form, and it's not only youth, and it's not only a plastic surgeon's ideal of what the ideal human form is, but it also is about like some aspect of your soul. What is the definition of beauty? It's like an aspect of your soul coming forward and not just about either a perfect feature of your body, or let's talk about like a place. Like if you're making a portrait, like a landscape of a place, it's not only about making it look exactly like if you took a photograph, because you guys also know photographs lie. Like you can really wildly distort something to looking, but is your viewpoint low? Is your viewpoint high? Is it fish lens? Any of those things, you know that it's possible to make very distortions. And the careers on Instagram that are based on distortions and editorial, they'll be like, show you like this beautiful cropping of this place that makes it look beautiful, and then cropping out all the stuff that is not that beautiful around it. But it's truthful that when you do art, you make editorial choices about what do you want to emphasize and what do you want to show and why is that important to you. I mean, when you really get down to it, art materials are expensive. And there has always been the question of like, what is a worthwhile subject matter that is worth the cost of the paint, the brushes, and the canvas? Very few things. Like a wadded up gum wrapper is actually not worthy of the expense that you endure in buying your ingredients. Your art, sorry, my brain's just not getting that word. But you're supposed to choose things that are worth the cost of the paint to be able to immortalize them for a long amount of time going forward. So that also is not something that every artist embodies, because I'm like, yes, like craftsman, this is why I feel like craftsmanship really matters, because I make a choice to make all of my items out of archival materials, because I intend for my pieces to be in the world for a long time. And so I also believe in like doing things from scratch. Like if you're going to cook steak at home, like you cook it from scratch, like you make the marinade, you do the preparation, and then you do it. So I'm not that much about like get a boxed mix, you know what I mean? And just add some water and make a thing. Start with good ingredients. So craftsmanship matters for me as part of the personal integrity of the energy of the piece. All of my paintings, I built my larger panels, not all of the smaller ones. Some of those I bought commercially, but all these bigger ones, I built the panels. I went to the lumber yard. I'm like dressed like a girl. They're like, what's this girl here doing in the lumber yard? I'm like, hi, I'd like to buy some wood, please. So they helped me, I know, with the big giant, but I do have power tools, even though I dress like a girl. I can do these things. So yeah, I buy these big giant pieces of high grade plyboard, and then I build the stretchers, like the supports on the back. And yeah, I had to learn how to use power tools in order to do this. Why do I bring that up? Because a lot of artists are very like pinkies up. They're like, oh, like I don't want to get sawed in my hair. I will buy a pre-made canvas. And that's fine. I'm not going to throw you out of art school because you bought a pre-made canvas. But when you're an artist, what you do is make everything and buy very few things that are pre-assembled. So as I became better in my art expression, I started making all of my own supports and also mixing all of my own paints. And it doesn't mean that I like gather flower nectar and make red paint out of it, but I went to a paint company. I know. And I got like the clear base, which is like a gloss medium, and then the pigments. And I learned how to combine them together. And why did I do that? Not just for bragging rights. I did that because I found I wanted to create certain colors that I just couldn't find. I did all of these paints, like all of these commercially available acrylic paints, and they didn't have the vibrancy that I was looking for. So that's why I'm like, I'm going to have to make it. So also, I didn't find 48-inch panels that were these big giant things just hanging out at the store that I could paint on. I'm like, huh, they don't have the size that I want. I'm going to have to make it. So as an artist, I evolved on my journey. Initially, I started to paint in like notebooks and 16 by 20 little, pieces of canvas and stuff, because that's what you guys have freely available in the world. But then I started to specialize because my compositions are all square and you didn't have a lot of square canvases and didn't have a lot of square frames. And I wanted to use these super bright colors, which again, the lighting is just dark in here. You can't really see it that effectively, but my paintings in my when you see them with your eyeballs, they're very, very bright. All right, super bright colors. And that's because I mix the paint myself and I know exactly how many drops of red I need to put into my clear media. And yeah, I mix all of these different textures too, like to be able to make something look like raised and dimensional as opposed to, flat and smooth. And all of these are aesthetic choices that I make that further validate my art and my vision and what I'm doing. And then the type of paint that I choose also, it is going to stay true in its colors for, let's say, at least 100 years. And when you're an artist, I think it's important to conceive of that. Like, do you paint for the future? Sometimes people are like, no, I just make a disposable piece of artwork for right now and I don't care what happens to it in the future. Let's talk about Burning Man, because I am like anti-Burning Man. And some people are going to be like, but Burning Man. And be like, no, I don't like Burning Man. Why do I not like it? Because, I mean, a lot of people do create stuff by hand that's innovative and real stuff, but also they make a lot of stuff that is meant to be disposed of. It is meant to be burned at the Burning Man. And so I think that there's something that is not socially positive and not artistically supportive about creating this very, very large art festival that has a huge amount of whatever it is, like esteem. Like there's a lot of elevation at being a part of that festival, but it's held in the middle of nowhere, someplace that is very, very inaccessible and kind of dangerous to your body to be there. And the art projects are funded at great expense, but they are mostly temporary installations that are then destroyed at the end of the experience. To me, that is also art is dead. That's like anti-cultural, because art is supposed to be a part of your life. It's not supposed to be something that you have to fly 3,000 miles to the middle of a desert to see. And art is supposed to, yeah, be a wild, experience and uplift you, but it's not supposed to be something that's disposable or simply burned and incinerated in order to get rid of it. Like I put so much effort into what I make, I would cringe if it got killed, one as soon as I completed it. That would just kill me as an artist. And I'm not like about like whatever those Buddhist sand paintings that are like, they're here 1 minute and then they're gone the next. I'm like, no, I want my art to stay for forever. You get it? Like, I don't make art that is like a Buddhist mandala. I am not about the impermanence and coming and going of life. I'm about like, I want this thing to stay here for as long as possible. Okay. So that's and I'm not at this point talking about blanket concepts of right and wrong. I'm talking about my personal art philosophy. My personal art philosophy is make an object, put great craftsmanship into it, put your heart and soul into it, make something that will last for a long amount of time. And I also feel do not pander. Do not pander to what are the fashions of the day, what gatekeepers and people who own galleries think your artwork should be. Stay completely truthful and laser focused to what you need to be doing inside. And then the other thing is do it to the nth degree. So if you do rainbow geometrics, do rainbow geometrics. Do every single rainbow geometric on every single surface of your world that it can possibly be. All right. Like that's me. All right. And you know what I don't do? I don't do portraits of dogs. And if someone came up to me and was like, I love your work, can you please paint my dog? I'd be like, thank you. That guy over there does dog paintings. Like hire him. He's your man. Because you're not supposed to be the Swiss Army knife doing every job for every person. Like art is very selective. You're not required to be like, I'm the chef that can cook anything. Just, give me your request on the menu. You get to say like, no, my specialty is making pasta, or my specialty is making cookies, and that's it. And then you focus on that and even the choice of your specialty is a big part of your message as an artist. So my color palette and my choice of subject matter and my repetitive focus on that subject matter, it is a big part of my message. And then that also relates to, like, you don't just take one piece of an artist's body of work out of context. You really need to look at the entire art output of an artist. And that, again, goes against a lot of the way that art is commodified in your world, where a person might labor for many, many years and then they finally sell one painting for $1 million. And then everyone would say, well, that's the painting, and that's the painting that's going to be in the museum and go on, and they will be remembered by that painting. But that painting is one step in a journey. And hopefully, as an artist, each one of you is or are evolving. And your artwork from 10 years ago doesn't look like your artwork from today. And you keep on going. You don't get stuck in repetitive style. So that way you're always challenged and you're always creating something that is new and fresh. And so you can't just cherry pick and be like, this one image out of this artist's catalog is good, and that is what the art world celebrates. You have to be like, wow, like this is where they started on their journey, and then they went through all these phases, and then you have this one, and then they also went in this direction over here. Because like the whole way that art is commodified and the way that artists are treated very badly in your world. And they pretty much are treated as not only disposable human beings, but their self-destruction is encouraged. Like when you look at an artist like Jean-Michel Basquiat, he was a young man and he was totally tempted by the art world all around him. Lots and lots of drugs, lots of white powdery, injectable, and snortable drugs. And this guy totally self-destructed, but brilliant painter, but he was encouraged towards that self-destruction because they were all like, once this guy destroys himself with drugs, then we'll get to make $1 million off of all of his artwork, and he won't be here making any more artwork, and everything will be super valuable, like it's kind of like with Van Gogh. And that as a template for how to treat artists is deplorable. That is terrible. That is wrong and bad. You should not do that. You should support artists, give them a great life, give them longevity in their career, and make it so that they don't have to, like blow their minds out with all sorts of drugs in order to achieve notoriety. And that also will be remembered as a wing in the future museum of like artists on drugs. Like, come with me, class. I'm the docent of the museum. Now we will go to the wing of the artists on drugs, and you get to see all the different things. Like, it's not necessarily a positive thing.
Okay, so many points I have to revisit here. What is the line between a new idea and a gimmick?
I'm impressed by your question. That's an amazing thing to talk about. I would say a gimmick at its heart, although it might be new or innovative, it is very manipulative. It's substanceless, so not substantial, and it is made to manipulate the viewer or the buyer. So something that's a gimmick is usually considered in sales or marketing and contains some level of not being genuine and authentic, and
Selfie
is
museum?
made. Say it again.
Selfie museums? Can you speak on selfie museums?
Oh, selfie museums. That's
Or
so
that's so
funny.
far from art, but I just would love for you to speak upon those.
Yeah, well, that would actually be contextualizing something that's not considered art as if it is art, which could be interesting for future generations, because there is a big distinction between what is on the wall in museums and galleries versus selfies. And like once people started to learn how to do that and it became a cultural thing, it became very ubiquitous and they're all over the place. So if there were no more humans left, and you came along as an outsider, extraterrestrial cultural anthropologist, you'd be like, oh, yes, like we have these boxes, rooms that have some imagery on the walls, but it is startlingly different from the imagery that we find on their cell phones that they seem to share with each other. This stuff is more important than the stuff that's in a stuffy museum hallway or whatever. So they might ascribe additional value to the things that we reproduce, because things that you reproduce and that you have in your life are clearly important to you. And I mean, I would say that the selfie craze and that approach to art making and art image generation has a lot to do with the attempt to reassert your existence in a cultural and technological milieu that attempts to erase or abnegate who you are. And everyone is like, I think I'm a person, but I need to prove it to myself. I better take a selfie, and that will prove it to me and everyone else. It's kind of like, I don't know who I am in the world, but if I take a picture of myself and share it with others, then they will say that's someone and she's doing something. And I think that's your whole world right now. Like, no one knows who they are or what the F they are doing, but they are taking selfies of their face and they are showing it to other people. And people are generally saying, like, okay, something happened. So time passed, something happened. I saw a thing, but it's very illiterate. Like, you're like, what is the meaning? It has no meaning. It just is a thing. But this is also like, in our world, people take pictures of everything that is not meaningful. And if you just looked on someone's camera roll, like, you would find, like, this is a picture of a bottle of shampoo, and then this is a picture of my dog, and then this is myself, and this is my family. Like, yeah, I'm not in love with the shampoo. I just took that picture. It means nothing to me. Like, that we just use imagery in a very unconscious way. But when we contrast, because you asked about innovation versus gimmick, when something is new and substantive, when something is new and profound and has, deep impact on your life, then it is innovative and worthwhile of attention. So I think gimmicky stuff is grabbing your attention, but is unworthy of it. But genuine innovations are worthy of your attention. And also, genuine beauty is worthy of your attention. Like, when you look at something of nature, like a unique tree or a mountain or something like that, like, there's only one of it. It doesn't look like anything you've ever seen before. It's not a cookie cutter, and it's worthy of your attention. And you look at it and you're like, this is something, and it's usually something that is a meaning that is beyond what language can convey. Because when you look at, like, let's say, have you ever been to one of those giant sequoias, like the giant redwoods? And there are these trees that are so tall. And when you stand underneath them, what is special and unique is that you're tiny and they're giant. And this is the biggest tree you've ever met in your whole entire life. That is the message, the experience of being in this wildly, giant, scaled up forest. And no one can convey that impact to you with words. Like, if I say to you, Lanley, technically you are smaller than a redwood tree, you'd be like, duh, I know. But when you go and you stand next to one of these trees, you're like, I feel so small and insignificant. This is the value of the presence of what you're experiencing. So we can go further, because you're probably going to want to know about, like, augmented reality, virtual reality, and all these artificially created environment places that art is starting to verge into.
So I'm seeing that you really value seeing art from the lens of an anthropologist or historian, and seeing it as a very important part of cultural studies. So tell me what the difference of art would be um, between something that's more figurative, or what is something that's realistic? Like a realistic documentation of someone's experience versus someone's fantastical piece of what they imagine in a fantasy imagined land. But they're also they've got a lot of skill in their artwork. But what's the difference between that imagery versus something that can be studied
I
from
think
the
both of the examples.
from the
Yeah.
historical lens?
Yeah, I think they're both valuable. If something is 100% a fabrication of your mind, or if it's somewhat based in reality, or wherever your imagery comes from, I think those are all completely valid. Like, I have no problem with that. Or if people, I mean, I've joked about the wing of, drug-induced artwork, but people have been making drug-induced artwork for millennia. It's a long, whatever, because it used to be like one person in the village would eat some weird mushrooms and have images and then tell everyone else about what they experienced. Like, it was not always like something for everyone to do, but it might be you are the adventurer that has those experiences, or maybe you have dreams, or maybe you have a completely different worldview, like Van Gogh had a level of epilepsy that distorted his visual field, and then that influenced how he portrayed what he saw in the world. So all of these, like sometimes fantastic imagery, fantasy, and fabrication, and these things, like I have no problem against that at all. I think that that can be very beautiful. Sorry, my thing beeps and then I turn it back on. No, I think that there's a value to that. Maybe you don't have to have 100% of your art be coming from that direction, but having some artists who are, out there visionaries and who are, like teetering on the edge of going out on the limb for other people, and then they come back, they bring back their visions and their images, and they share it with people. So I think all of those examples that you brought forward, I think I'm fine with. I'm not that fine with the stuff that is created through prompting, like of an AI, because when you do that, you're really just using words, and the AI is doing the job of the artist in coming up with these collages of imagery. And, we can talk about this too, collage and pastiche culture. I do not diminish those. I think that those are a natural aspect of the growth trajectory of humanity, that originally, you were creating holistic images that might be one face or one place or one bowl of fruit. But there was a certain time, like especially in music post World War II, when music really changed and shifted due to the technology that became available to your world. It's called looping. And so it used to be like one person wrote a song. I am Mozart, I wrote a song, and here it is. But when this technology was created and then it became more available to the public, so the looping technology was really from the 1950s. And if you want to check out a really cool musician, his name is Terry Riley, Riley, and he's a pioneer from that time. And he did these very, very out there compositions using clips from other people's work. So this is the question of, what is it to be an artist? Do you have to build the guitar in order to be an artist? No, you can buy a pre-made guitar. The guitar can be made by a guitar making expert. Do you have to write the song originally in order to be an artist? No, you can be playing on a guitar that somebody else built, and you can play a song that somebody else innovated, but you add your own flavor to it, okay? And then you get to the next level, which is pastiche culture. What if you don't play the guitar, and what if you don't sing the song, but what if you take a recording of someone else who played and sang the song, and you turn it into something new? And that's what this original guy did, Terry Riley. He created lots and lots of loops using the recording stuff that was just being developed, the recording technology. Then you fast forward to like the late 1970s, early 1980s, and you've got hip hop culture. And in that culture, taking loops and samples from other pre-established artists is its own level of artistry. And I validate this in the curation of all of the different songs that exist in the world. This hip hop artist chose to slice this 2-second clip and put it into their work. There's a choice that's being made. There's an aesthetic choice. So even if you're working with pre-made ingredients, like pre-sliced sandwich ingredients, you're making a lot of choices about how you layer up all of these things to make the sandwich that is known as hip hop music. So my aesthetic is very much about like making everything from the beginning, scratch, and not buying pre-made stuff. But I will say that in my music that I make, I work with the sample library, that I don't always start off with my own, whatever guitar riff. Sometimes I'll take a sample of someone else playing a guitar riff, and then I will put that into my song, and I'll add layers on top of it, and I'll change the editing process of it. And there's a lot of artistry that goes into how many times in a song do you hear a particular note or a particular guitar phrase, or how much is it emphasized. So what we're dealing with now is even, of course, beyond the hip hop culture and looping technology of the early 1980s. Now, through technological advancements, like almost anyone can have professional quality music production software in their own home. And so, yeah, I work with Ableton Live. And that means that I can do things that, if we were in the 1950s, it would cost you $1 million to be able to do this. And you would spend only like 5 minutes in the studio. Like I have all day long. I'm not working with tape. I can't, because the tape is like the film. It was very expensive and you had a limited amount of time. Yes. And you couldn't, like, once you did it, it was like, that's it, like you're done. And so, yeah, I can be hugely experimental. I can work in my own home. I can take hours and hours in the studio and I can make a song. And I can be like, that sounds like crap. Erase it all. Let's start again. Or take this part is the only good part. And then let's add other stuff onto it. So my art aesthetics for my visual arts, I have a certain level of my parameters and what I think is good. But in my music, I'm telling you guys also, I started out as a huge snob and I was originally going, I'm only going to play acoustic instruments. And I hope you can hear my sarcasm too. And I'm only going to play music tuned to 432 hertz. And I'm only going to play analog things with my voice. And then when I got my first synthesizer, I was like, but these songs are so cool and these sounds are lots of fun. I can make this sound. I can make this sound. And then I was like, something? I like these digital sounds and I don't only have to play analog sounds and I don't only have to use, whatever the singing bowls and other resonant instruments. I'm allowed to do all sorts of things. I know. And then I gave myself artistic freedom because basically what I said was, anything is a sound and sounds put together make music, and music is not only truthful if you build a guitar from scratch and then sing yourself. You can make music that is made out of other people's music, samples, synthesized sounds and other things. And I began to just explore every type of sound that I could create in my music. And I don't want to say like I'm a sound slut. That was just going to come out really, really wrong. But just like I dropped my standards. I completely dropped my standards. And I said, I will use any type of instrument. And then I really enjoyed that because I did things that were surprising to my ears, that made things that I could never have imagined. So a lot of my music is very experimental and exploratory. And I want to bring that forward to other artists and musicians. I want you to know, like with my art work that is visionary, I'm trying to achieve a very, very particular look. And there's definitely a right and a wrong. And if I don't get it, I'm like, this is not right. Like, try it again. But with my music, I'm very experimental. And I'm like, there's no right and there's no wrong. There's just me trying to express something that is not expressible in any other way. And I stopped limiting myself in the parameters of what I thought was valid as a musician. And now I use any type of technology and any type of sound maker to be able to make music. And I think that is kind of like coming out the other side of the selectivity and snobbery that I was in terms of my musical tastes before that.
It's fascinating to hear you coming from your purest ways and intentions and grow into more of a state of artistic freedom. I'm going to go back to you mentioning about how overall an artist is putting their own stamp on things, even though they can sample pieces and other elements from found sources. So I want to ask you about your opinion on this one event, and you're going to roll your eyes, but it's this artist, or he claims he's an artist, and he took Instagram posts and he enlarged them, and it was a scandal in the art world, right? So he enlarged them and
Remember this?
then he printed them and put them in museums, and they sold for a lot of money. Have you heard about that? You remember
Yeah.
it? Yeah, so,
Yes, I do remember this.
okay, I want to hear your take on what that is, if it's art, and just your feedback on it.
Thank you. I would say that was a hugely troubling experience because it exploited the artists. So my shock and horror at the exploitation of the artists is somewhat different from the question about the validity of the imagery as art. I remember there was one particular art, it's actually a collective called the Suicide Girls, that they had their original artwork that they had made that were things that were drawn and painted on a canvas. on their Instagram, and that they put effort into creating this imagery, whether or not we think it's good or meritorious. But what was not okay was that due to the terms and conditions of participating on Instagram, it was legal and totally acceptable for some completely unaligned stranger to come along and take their imagery of their pictures, print it out, and like you said, sell it for profit. I think they sold prints for $100,000. And that's a high price for a reproduction and not the original. All of that, I was shocked and horrified because it is really bad for artists. And that was why for many years I didn't participate on Instagram, because I did not want to relinquish my royalty rights and my ownership of the images as an artist. So you have to start to understand, if you're an artist, an art maker, or anything that you make and do, and if you put something up on Instagram, it is possible for someone else to co-opt or misappropriate your artwork to present it as their own. They could even take an image and print it on fabric, or print it on a baseball cap, or print it on a greeting card or something like that. And it would be very, very difficult for you to be able to legally take them to court and get them to stop doing that. So for those reasons, I've always been very selective about once I did get an Instagram, how I share my artwork. Like if I take a picture of my painting, I will not take a picture of my painting. I will take a picture of my painting with my thumb in the image, you know what I mean? Or like with like a drinking glass next to it or in front of it or something like that, so that you can see very clearly that it is the image of my painting, but then there's something, other objects around it that you couldn't just reproduce it. Very, very disturbing, because that is the essence of what it is to bypass the profit and recognition of the actual originator of the art, and have the entrepreneurs, the later parasites, do all of the profiting from that. That's been the art world for millennia, where the original artist, the word starving and artist, how do these come together? This is just, I'm joking. They shouldn't, but they do. So artists have been described as starving for millennia because they are the creative spark that makes something, but then someone else takes the something that they made and sells it for the money and actually gets the reward for what the artists have done. And that is a paradigm that must end, because in finer times, artists really felt their pieces deeply. That's everyone from Mozart to sculptors like Bernini to painters like Michelangelo. Like they lived, ate, slept, embodied their artwork on every level. And it was not merely a hobby or something that distracted them that they then, shared with others on Instagram for moments of distraction. And when those artists are no longer here, that is when their artwork is considered to be a masterpiece, an icon worth, a priceless amount of money. Artists don't always get the recognition in their time. And who gets the money is like the art supporters, the people who commissioned the artwork to be made and supported the artist in their life, but the artist didn't necessarily get the recognition and support when they were alive. It's always posthumous, and they're not here anymore. And that's actually as a brief aside, one of my favorite Doctor Who episodes is where Doctor Who, the time traveler, goes back in time and gets Vincent van Gogh and puts him in his time-traveling telephone box and brings him to the present, to a modern museum showing of all of Van Gogh's work. It's a retrospective, and Van Gogh is there in the museum, and he's listening to the scholar talk about, he says, these are the most resplendent works ever by the best artist ever, and how much I love Vincent van Gogh. And Van Gogh is there listening to this, like over his shoulder. Tears are streaming down his eyes, and he just goes over and he hugs the guy. He's like, thank you very much. Like, so I'm trying to say, if you're an artist or a musician, like most artists in their life haven't achieved that level of recognition and celebration. I think Van Gogh would have lived a much longer life if people had actually appreciated him when he was here. He would not have shot himself in despair. So just please take heart if you're an artist or musician. We're changing that whole entire paradigm, but for a very long amount of time, that was considered normal. And so unfortunately, the Suicide Girls fell prey to that type of scamming of artists and people who generate imagery. And then I think later they wised up about how they, share their images on Instagram. But every single person who is an original artist has to be very cautious about sharing your visuals with the world, watermark your stuff, be very selective about how you present your stuff. And the problem is that there are royalty collecting organizations that scour the internet for fraudulent use of audio files, and you get paid, but not for visual files. So this is the imbalance. So I'm a musician and I have a company that goes around the every place where music is played on the internet and listens to see, are you playing any of Aurora's music? Because if you're playing Aurora's music, better give me like 0.003 cents. Then you're allowed to play this music. I could get a tiny royalty, right? But it really adds up. Lots of different radio stations and lots of places play your music. I'm not the only person who has royalties collected. I want you to know when I said I have a company, they don't only work for me. They work for many, many millions of musicians. But this is the way things work. And they have algorithms that are created to scan the entire internet to see when your music is being used illegally. So yeah, if someone else put my music on their YouTube video and they didn't give me credit or pay a royalty, then they would get a copyright infringement strike. And YouTube would say, you are very naughty for stealing Aurora's hard-earned music and not giving her 0.003 cents. And that same is not true of my artwork. My visual artwork, if someone else took it, screenshotted it, and then put a silly meme of their whatever, Kermit, Pepe, or something else, whatever, if they memeified it, then I would have literally like no legal recourse. And I, wouldn't be able to stop them. And they might be making money off of the things that I put my soul into. So there's different rules in your society, but we don't have the same level of enforcement for visual artwork. So if you're a visual artist or a photographer, watermark your stuff because people screenshot it and memeify it, and then you end up being used as the butt of a joke and not getting the payments that you should be getting for what you're doing. But now that all of these AI image generators are so cheap and ubiquitous, they're not even going to steal your imagery anymore. They're just going to go directly to the AI image generator. And if they need a meme with a picture of a fluffy kitten on top of a mushroom raining strawberries on top of her head, then they'll just get the machine to make it. So I hope that everyone's on board with this for me. When I sense AI generated imagery, I just don't pay attention. And sometimes it's for a person's headshot professionally. They're like, I need to look professional. I'll have AI generate my headshot. And as soon as I see that, I'm like, I'm not doing anything professional with you with your AI generated headshot. I would rather have a person with like a giant zit on their face and their hair is totally uncombed, but they're a real person. I mean, like, that's a real person. I want them to be my whatever, acupuncturist. I don't want this fake AI generated person, like they don't feel real to me. So I hope that there is backlash against AI being used in that way. And also, what you guys have to comprehend is that it's not just merely my aesthetics that become inflamed and enraged when I see AI being used. I recognize the whole agenda behind the generation of the images as being an anti-human agenda of disempowerment. So not only are your jobs as physical artists and graphic designers being stolen, and not only is your visual sense being diluted by being given a lot of crappy and mediocre imagery, but it's a slippery slope. And at the bottom of the slippery slope is like a very, very bad experience of swirling down the cosmic toilet into nihilism. It's a nihilistic slip and slide where you just get less and less and less real and less yourself, and you become more and more dehumanized until finally you are like some kind of a cautionary tale, like an empty, soulless, mechanized non-person. I don't want any of that to happen to any of you.
Wow, AI doesn't seem so innocent anymore after you describe it that way.
Very
So,
naughty.
while we're on the topic of scanning the web for copyright infringements for imagery,
Yeah.
what do you think about NFTs? Wasn't that supposed to solve that problem? And I never got into it, so I don't know
Girl,
anything about it. So,
I am gonna rant. Like
okay.
if I had sleeves, I would roll them up and be like, prepare for rant now. Okay. So When NFTs first started, again, it was presented as this wonderful egalitarian elevation of for artists who had struggled for so long, because this one guy had been doing like imagery. It was all digitally created image, but he not computer generated. He made it himself using Photoshop tools, but he had been doing like painting a day for over a year. And then he finally put it all together into one big giant collage of his digital paintings. And that sold as an NFT for $1 million. And that was a big deal because, like I told you, when I first came here as Aurora and started to be an artist, I thought very naively, oh, like you just make small paintings and do group shows and put your stuff on the wall, and eventually people buy your stuff, and then your career just takes off and explodes. But that is not the world, because you have all sorts of very imbalanced and unfair things that are happening. So you can't just expect to have that level of success. Every artist that I know is looking for their pathway to success, because we don't want to have side jobs and multiple gigs to be able, like, I want to be an artist making my money from making my art. And the world has been set up in a way that it's almost impossible to do so. And then what you end up doing, you have your side gigs, which take up most of your time and energy and make it not possible for you to actually produce the quality and level of artistry that you really want to make. Like maybe you only have whatever, a few hours once a week to be able to make your art, as opposed to 8 hours every day to be able to focus on a particular project. So when that happened, it excited me and many, many others who thought, NFTs, this is my opportunity to be able to go forward. I'm going to make $1 million. I'm going to turn and also it was good because I didn't have to lose my physical objects. I'm going to turn my physical object artworks into an NFT. I retain the original, which is what you always want to do. And then I can make lots and lots of cryptocurrency by selling my NFTs. Again, I hope you can hear the dripping sarcasm in my voice, because that's not what happened. What did not happen was the best artists who were busy laboring at side jobs and being downtrodden suddenly started making NFTs. And then all these crypto cowboy billionaires started buying up their NFTs. And then all of the artists quit their day jobs. That did not happen. You know what happened? This guy made $1 million. A lot of artists tried to get into the NFT space, and so did a lot of crappy charlatans. And the crappy charlatans are not good artists. And they're like, well, you mean I can just take 2 minutes, make some stupid thing with a digital paintbrush or generate some imagery and then put it out there as an NFT. And one of these crypto cowboy guys is going to, millionaire me up, like sign me up. I'm going to do it. And they started to do all sorts of crappy stuff to dilute the pool of NFT genius that's out there. They created stupid memes, stupid characters, uninspired imagery, and basically everything that they possibly could just for profiteering. Totally diluted the space. And then also the purchasers, the viewers, so the artists fell down, the community fell down, the viewers and purchasers also fell down, because a lot of those guys weren't really art lovers. A lot of those guys were crypto cowboys that were looking for the next thing to invest in. So this was nothing new to me, because although I did not live here on your planet in the 1980s, I was aware of the 1980s art market, because I had encountered people in upstate New York in the early 2000s who had purchased very bad art in the 1980s. And they had it in their barn. And they were like, yeah, can you believe I paid this amount for this in the 1980s? And I was like, tell me more. What happened? He was like, yeah, this guy told me that this would take off and spend $8,000 on it. Now it's trash. It's worth nothing. And I was like, oh, well, I'm sorry that happened to you. But I learned from hearing that guy's sad story. And it was also a very ugly piece of art. But that's what happens. When you buy something ugly that people say it's going to get more expensive and it's a great investment, and then what happens is it's not a great investment, no one wants it, it drops in value, and then it just becomes a giant albatross that you have to carry around with you. That's like NFTs, except you don't have to carry it around and store it in your barn. You're just to keep it on a hard drive. You're like, here's this worthless, ugly thing that I paid way too much money for. On the plus side, at least I don't have to also rent a barn to store it in. It's just an ugly image. So that people who are profiteering, like, here's the deal. If you're an art buyer or an art viewer, please listen. Buy the things that you love. Buy the things that speak to you. that you feel that you would be proud to support that art maker and that you would be proud to have that object in your energy field. And don't buy something just because someone tells you that art maker is cool or this is going to get a lot more expensive in days, weeks, months, years. It's a great investment. Because when you do that, then you find out that sometimes you're just supporting a personality that is not a very valid art maker. Sometimes they just are a flimsy balloon that has been expanded upward with no real substance inside of them. And a lot of the time, the very trendy things that they are making don't stand the test of time. And then it ends up being a terrible investment on your part. Find not only the pieces that you resonate with and that have a deep impact on your heart or on your feelings, but also find the artists that are people that you want to support. Like you got to find people that are not lazy, mediocre, fat asses and doo-doo heads. Find the people who really make art because they love art, because they are deeply invested in it, because it's part of their soul, that they'd be doing it whether or not they're making money. And when you buy art from that person, you literally transform their life. Like when people have bought art from me, and especially in times when I was like financially struggling, that not only kept me afloat, it gave me a will to live. I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead. And they're like, I will buy your painting for $5,000. I'm like, $5,000, I'm alive. I'm alive again. I can live again. But for real, like it's amazing when someone believes in you enough to be able to purchase one of your pieces. It is like getting a much needed shot of adrenaline or nutrients, and you kind of jump up off of your artistic deathbed and you're like, wow, people like what I do. My life has meaning and purpose. I'm going to keep on going. And then hopefully you can find a group of authentic supporters who are with you throughout your whole entire career so that you never go dead again. Like you don't feel like you're so financially, drained that you can't go onward, that people are like, this person is important, doing important work in the world. Let's make sure that they keep on being able to do that. That approach is very, very much what it's like in the world where I come from. I come from a very rarefied atmosphere, like a higher dimensional space where energy flows to excellence. And there's no question of like ego pumping, like having to advocate for yourself and being like, I'm the greatest artist ever. Buy my stuff, buy my stuff. People just look at you and they're like, well, you're the greatest artist ever. I will buy your stuff. And you're like, cool, that was awesome. Like, but we don't have money and commodification, but it would be more like this. You're clearly the greatest artist ever. Do you need paints? Do you need canvases? Do you need a painting table? Do you need a light bulb for your light? Do you need a place, a studio to do your thing? Here's all of those things. Please do your thing for the world. We need you. And also, here's your food and here's your car. We don't have cars. We don't have food, but you understand, here's your basic sustenance to be able to keep you alive. It is when the role of being an artist is as valuable to the community as like a farmer. Like farmers, like, something, you're going to need some land. You're going to need to grow some food because we all benefit when you grow potatoes. Then we get to have French fries. When you look at art as an innate and necessary part of your culture, then you look at artists and you say, what do you need to be able to do your stuff? And most of the artists that I know, we've all been doing our stuff like under very extreme and not ideal circumstances. If you made sure that all of the artists actually had like their bills paid and didn't have to work 12 side jobs and had whatever medical care and savings in the bank, like even the quality of the artwork that we produce, we would not only make more, we would make better art. And that art would serve our community. So art is not just self-service, it is community service. And the community should support and celebrate the artists who are doing this incredibly valuable form of service. And it's not just a few carefully chosen, elevated individuals. It should be all of the people that have art talent. So, I mean, and maybe some people aren't that great, and maybe they just draw like whatever turtles and they don't draw them that well, but there is still a value to them doing what they do in the world. So I want you to know, like, if you just draw turtles and you're not even that good at it, please keep going. please keep doing it because there is a value to your self-exploration, even if it's not a commodified end product that you sell to other people. The time that you spend painting your turtle pictures is valuable to you, and we recognize that in the world. So as AI has exploded in the world that we're in right now, not only did it first start out by like kind of co-opting the role of the graphic designer and then taking many jobs away from people who are actual artists, now AI and artificial general intelligence is poised to be able to take away jobs that are considered to be regular jobs, like normal jobs, like being a lawyer. You know, most artists, their parents say to them, like, hey, kid, get a job. Like maybe your mom is Italian or something, but they say, get a job, get a real job, kid, right? Why can't you be a lawyer? And because being a lawyer is considered to be like such a good job and you always have money coming in. But in our world, and especially with AGI, you're going to have machine intelligence writing a lot of legal briefs, and a lot of lawyers are going to be out of a job. And being a stockbroker, be a nice stockbroker and earn a bunch of money instead of being a starving artist. A lot of stockbrokers lost their jobs with the different, market, wild gyrations of the market. And now a lot of trades are being done through automated bots. It's not the same place that it ever was. So what you're going to see is artists were just some of the first people to be automated out of their earning position. There's going to be other people that lose their jobs because of AI, AGI, and automation. And then you're going to have to completely redefine what is a worthy activity. Because for many hundreds of years, a worthy activity was having a job that someone will pay you for. And it doesn't matter if it's the stupidest thing in the world. If someone will pay you for it, then it validates the activity. And at a certain point, you will have nobody paying you for some of these invalid activities. And we have to make a cultural reassessment about what is a valuable activity. And if you exclusively paint pictures of turtles, in the previous world, they might say, no one's going to buy that stuff. Get a job, kid. But now that no one has a job, the activity of being very inspired to paint turtles could be a totally valid way for you to spend your day. And our culture might have to recalibrate to say, what do you need? You need green paint. If you're going to paint turtles, you'll need some green paint and, a light and paper and other things like that. Like it ends up being not that lavish, but you're moving away from the commodification model where people sell their time for money. And we move into a self-expressive model where people are valued for their innate being and their innate sharing in the world. And I want you to feel that way because, when I talked about calligraphy and Instagram and things like that, like sharing your little sketches and doodles can be valuable. I want you to know that. And not everything is art that's on the scale of a grand magnitude solo show in a big giant museum. Sometimes it is a little doodle that is a 5-second video on somebody's Instagram. And sometimes that uplifts that one person. That's your audience and you connect with your audience. So believe in yourself. Even whatever you do might seem small and inconsequential, but it could be important to the people around you. And then we also have to sustain people who are doing small, meaningful gestures of creativity and also larger, more extensive gestures of creativity. Ask me about something like the Sphere over in Las Vegas. You know what I'm talking about?
No, but I will ask you, tell me about this sphere over Las Vegas.
So, I mean, I'm interested in it because it's a giant performance space that is shaped like a sphere, and they do projection mapping there. Projection mapping is when they use varieties of angled cameras to send outward imagery from movie cameras. They can make it look like anything. Like they could make it look like you're swimming underwater or that there's lots of geometries or whatever, and that they do this as a light show in conjunction with the the auditory artists that are playing there. So playing the Sphere is about more than just being a rock and roll band. It's also about the imagery that kind of goes around the whole amphitheater and how that encompasses the audience. So as an artist, I get excited because I'm like, hooray, in immersive art experience, the most amazing things are going to happen there. And then what in our diluted and deluded world, it's two different words, but in our very, corrupt world, what happens are very uninspired artists end up making the music for there, and very, very uninspired imagery ends up accompanying the uninspired music. And it's something just like a zombie, or, something silly, or something just disgusting, or not that well made. And I'm like, harumph, if I was in that sphere, I would make it beautiful rainbow lasagna images. But here's the point. Just like I told you about that wing of the museum that people got into through sexual favors, like, being an artist at that level in our world means that you have made compromises and agreements and sometimes sold aspects of yourself in order to get to that level of commercialism. And I would never sell myself in that way. So in order to access that giant paintbrush, you have to lose your soul. And you're going to be like, wow, everybody who's playing the sphere lost their soul. I know you're going to ask me all these questions, but let's say a sizable number of them have lost their souls because they sold their real, true treasure of themselves to be able to get a small amount of materialistic elevation, but they're not themselves anymore. And I refuse to do that. So I would be like, yeah, I would love to have these cool toys and make awesome immersive art projects, but I will not sell who I am or stop being who I am in order to get those art materials. And so that's really the reason why my art expression has remained relatively low tech, because I don't have to ask anybody's permission to be able to buy a paintbrush that's like a little piece of animal hair on a skinny stick. This is like the lowest tech. It's just like from a Neanderthal could make that paintbrush. And I don't have to ask anybody's permission or be a part of their weird, distorted, cultish worldview or whatever to be able to make my paintings. I'm like, yep, nope, I buy paints, I buy pigments, I buy brushes, I make my supports, and I make my imagery. That's remaining unaffiliated and independent in this world as an artist, I feel like has been a huge accomplishment, because there are ways that you can achieve support, financial support, and even social celebration. But there's always a price to pay. And the price is like your true self. You become less your true self. Sometimes it's literal demonic possession. Sometimes it is through the sacrifice and diminishment of your artistic vision.
What you said earlier about people will be valued more and more as for their innate being and sharing who they are. I have been seeing that. Well, of course, like the Patreon platform has become more popular and people are um, getting subscriptions for just doing whatever they're doing. I am thinking about one particular person. I don't know what her handle is, but she's a bread maker. She loves making sourdough bread. And she stopped making bread just so she can innovate different breads. And that was her, I don't know if you want to call it art form, but that was what brought her joy. And she would ask for subscriptions just so she can keep doing that. And she would be supported in that. And then I'm thinking of another artist on Instagram. She made very beautiful ceramic teapots. And they were all different and they looked lifelike. It was just amazing, her craftsmanship, but she wouldn't sell any of them. Isn't that crazy? So every once in a while she would sell them, but she used the Patreon platform as well to support her so she just could keep creating more of these ceramic tea sets. And she would have tea parties surrounding them. And that was an expansion of her art so that people could experience it. And so that's what you reminded me of when you said more people are just going to be supported in that way.
Totally great. Those are great examples. And I am an enthusiast for the platform Patreon and have been on there for many, many years. And I think that that template is a great template for success, because I agree, it's not fair to say to an artist or a person who generates something, like if you make sculptural teapots, to be like, okay, I'll support you in your work. I'll pay you $1 million, but I get the teapot. Because you know what? When you make something, it really is an expression of you. My paintings are super valuable to me because they represent not only like a year of my life and everything I was going through at that time, but they're like an externalization of my soul. And I would not want someone else who is an unkind person, who maybe is a bad person or whatever to own a piece of my soul. Like even if someone's super evil, it was like, I'll give you $10 million. I would still be like, I don't want to sell this piece of me to you, even for $10 million. I want to sell it for $10 million to someone who's really cool. But I think I've also shared with you, Len, that I'm not that much in the sales modality for my larger panels because I didn't actually make them with the concept of wanting to sell them, even though I've been aware of that coming here from over 20 years ago, that yeah, what you're supposed to do as an artist is make a product, commodify what you make, and then sell it to someone else. And that's how you sustain yourself as an artist. But things are different now, and my body of work is powerful because it is cohesive. Each panel is like a chapter in a larger expression. And I want to keep it as a cohesive body of work. So I've been very clear, especially like over the past 6 years or so, that I don't want to sell my big panels. What I want to do is have an exhibit, like a traveling exhibit that I have 12 of them at this point. So of course that represents like over 12 years worth of work. And to be able to have it, in a display, it's more valuable to not stop being fragmented. Okay, so from the beginning, even when I started making these paintings, I knew that I was making them for the community. I make this as information that you can access that comes from a higher dimension. And so I have a job. I'm like, okay, I am from another dimension and I'm trying to give you information about that. I don't just want to give that information to wealthy people and wealthy evil people. Like I did not paint it for them. I painted it for you guys. And I did become aware of the concept of what a museum is in my journey here being Aurora. I'm like, oh yeah, they have places for stuff like that. It's called a museum where you are able to go in for a nominal fee and look at all of the art that is in there and is considered for the community. But I'm also grounded enough to comprehend that being an artist in a museum is considered to be a huge accomplishment and the top of the elevation of the art field, and that it sounds self-aggrandizing to say, oh yes, I didn't paint any of these things for, commodification purposes. I painted them all to be in a museum. That perhaps sounds egotistical, but it is the absolute truth. In everything that I painted it to be able to be an expression or an exhibit for the community and not just a commodity that a rich person would own. And I'm sticking with that because now that I'm at this point in being, I'm not just a beginning artist, I'm much more of what you would call an established artist, but I haven't sold off my pieces. So I have found ways to be able to sustain my daily life and my resource needs without selling my pieces. And now that I have 12 of them together, they're worth way more than they would be if I had broken up the set and sent them out to various different people. So yeah, it's my intention to have something that I'm loosely calling an art trust, even though I don't think that those words are exactly right in describing this, but the sense of having a traveling exhibit that is, I still own the pieces myself, but that other people are able to access and be in the energy fields of the pieces for a small fee, like, under $20, and to have a big, beautiful display space where you can go and look at the paintings and be a part of it and be in there. And yeah, and then of course I would have things that are like the art book or the clothing that you could take home with you as a remembrance of that experience. But it's always been my intention for it to be for the community and something that is like an immersive place that you can go into, as opposed to a valuable object that very, very few people get to see. And I also learned that as an artist, you get to do stuff like that. But some people think like, oh, you're an artist, you're totally disempowered, you're at the mercy of everyone else. If they say like, you're going to do this, or here's a bunch of money, like sit down and shut up. And I'm like, no, actually, you don't have to be that way as an artist. And one artist who I admire a lot, like not a total endorsement of them as a person, but of their way of doing things, is Alex Gray. He is, and I did, meet him in person because he lives in the area of New York that I moved out of, and now I live in California. But I actually met him on several occasions and saw his artwork in person. And he similarly did not kowtow to the gallery establishment world. Like he was in New York, and in order to be in all these different galleries, I think that his aesthetic and his subject matter, that they wouldn't have like agreed to it. So he's like, fine, I will have my own display space. So he started his own kind of gallery display space, and he put these incredible like gold ornate designed frames around his pieces. That's totally not what modern art did. Modern art at the time did plain black frames. Plain black frames. Like if you want to make a painting and have people take it seriously, stick that sucker in a plain black, usually a float frame, and then people will be like, "Oh, that is art with capital A." And he designed these very wild Baroque gold, just like super energized frames around it. And it was not the aesthetic of what the art world wanted, the ugly art world of the 1980s, with things like will end up in a barn. Okay. Not good aesthetics. But so anyway, he started his own thing. And then eventually he became so elevated in his own presentation of his artwork that he just became a name that everyone can recognize, and his imagery is iconic. So yeah, not a total endorsement of him as a person, but I think that the way that he's done his career as an artist is wonderful because he never compromised. He never stopped being himself. He never said like, oh, well, what if I painted things that were slightly more palatable and nicer for other people to look at? Then someone will buy my work. He figured out a way to be able to stay true to his vision and sustain himself as an artist. So I chose to be the same way, because sometimes people, when I was early in my career, they'd be like, well, we're having a group show. The theme is black and white. And I'm like, oh, my artwork is rainbow. They're like, you don't fit. And I'm like, but all I do is rainbow. And then they're like, well, do something non-rainbow. I'm like, I can't do something non-rainbow. Like rainbow is my thing. So that is kind of giving you a sense of how the disempowerment narrative goes for artists, where it's like, hey, like you ain't got any money, kid. We're going to have a group show. The show is the puppies and kittens show. You don't paint puppies and kittens, we'll paint some for the show because you're going to want to paint something and sell it in this show. None of that works. And I think that all of that probably didn't really work that well 20 or 30 years ago. And now that the entire gallery system has recalibrated and changed, I don't think that that works anymore. So it was really a dying thing, even at the time that I came into this world. And now it is really like fully on its deathbed with no resuscitation going on. And I think that's positive and good. I think that artists need to paint what they need to paint, not just paint commodities and things that will get them into the club. And then, yeah, so I figured out that I want to have a traveling exhibit, and that's what I am articulating here. So thank you for being my sacred witness. And then that also like, just is a different way of being able to cultivate my art career and my art sharing, because no longer am I interested in like going around to galleries and submitting myself and saying like, am I good enough? Which is what the process of going to galleries is like. Like you kind of submit your work and curators are like, yes or no. And sometimes it can feel very personal, like, why are they rejecting you? And why do they like that guy? And then you look at what's on the wall and you're like, they like that guy and they don't like me. Like, what is wrong with me? Like it can send you into a real tailspin, and none of it is fair. And as soon as I learned about that, and I'm like, oh, it's totally random, arbitrary, and unfair, then I'm like, this does not sound appealing to me. And also, some galleries just don't like rainbow. Because you know what? A lot of times people are buying stuff for their house, and rainbow doesn't always match the decor of the house. They're like, make something in beige, and then I'll happily put this in my gallery. I'm like, I do not paint in beige. This is not going to happen. All right. So, yeah, you have to stay true to yourself, and then the world will recalibrate all around you. And then also sometimes it takes a long time to be able to find celebration. And so that's what earlier in my career, I found that people wanted me to change my message and my palette and my style to be able to sell paintings or be a part of their club or whatever. And I was always like, no. And now I've become myself so much and stayed myself so consistently that people pretty much affiliate me with rainbow colors. And if I didn't paint something that was rainbow, they would be like, who are you and what have you done with the real Aurora? Like, this is not your work. How you must, paint your. So I'm like happy that I'm at that level. It took 20 years of really staying strong in who I am and not going with the wind, wavering with the wind of whichever direction popularity goes. So I say this to other people who might be listening who are artists. Maybe you're just at the level of your career where you're still emerging. Like maybe you've just started making artwork and you're still finding your voice and you're still finding your style and you're still finding out who you are. Or maybe you know who you are, but maybe other people have asked you to be slightly less rainbow than you want to be. I want to encourage you to keep on being who you are unapologetically, and the world will rearrange itself and the world will catch up to you, but you can't stop and do what other people want because they're part of a dead world and you have to bring new life into the world.
That's such a beautiful message. Um, so I've been gathering all of these words on what the definition of a true artist is, and I'm gonna just shout out these words. So there are control, intention, energy, execution of vision, authenticity, standing the test of time, the method as a path to self and soul expansion. And I think that is a really wonderful reminder as well of um, how to embody yourself as an artist and to continue the artist's path. Because I think maybe the misunderstandings and degradation of art and the value of art is directly related to just the degradation of humanity. And with the rise of social media, everything, all the energy is removed from life as you're viewing it on just like a 2D screen that you're doom scrolling. Like all of these highlights and stories really don't have meaning when you're just compelled to take pictures of what you're eating every day, right? It's not a real story. Even though the meaning of that word is degraded. Um, so yeah, it's hard for art to be valued the way that it should be when we don't really understand ourselves as a person. And so we wouldn't understand artists that are emerging from their true soul, authenticity, and vision. Like we don't understand ourselves. How can we see and understand what real people are putting out?
I think you make such a valid point about the art world in this culture representing the wild, out of control gyrations of the culture itself. That it's not just the meaninglessness of art or social media, it's everything. It's everything here. The world has really devolved into a very self-conflictory, I won't say fully meaningless, but I will say highly self-contradictory series of proposals of bizarreness and things that don't make sense and surrealism and the art that is expressed in that surrealistic world often, represents the confusion that's there. In a pristine system, artists would lead the way. In a pristine system, other people would be like doom scrolling on social media and be like, we don't know what the F we're doing. And the artists would be painting away in our studios being like, we know what we're doing and we're happy to share it with you and hopefully inspire you in your life. Because of economic imbalances, artists painting away in their studios have not always been appreciated and celebrated in terms of resources to be able to keep going in their life. That's the real thing. Like when you are not able to sustain yourself on your artwork, then it means that you have to sell your time doing something else and then do your artwork as a hobby. And then it means that you're not really being the thought leader that you would like to be and cultural leader that you should be. So art is not just a decorative ruffle around the edge. Artists are supposed to be leaders at the center of the culture, helping to give meaning and direction to the lives of regular everyday people so that they don't feel like things are hopeless, meaningless, nonsense to the point of ridiculousness, and just like there's no reason to live in life, and to be able to inspire people towards something better. You were talking about the beautiful sourdough maker. I want to make an exception for food because I talk about like the facility of objects. Like if you make a bowl or a spoon, technically it's not art because it has a utility, and it can be beautiful, but it's a craft or a decorative object. But I think food is art. I think that food, although it has the utility of nourishing our body, everything about it to me is an art form, especially like I build my stretchers from scratch, and a lot of people grow things in their garden from the very beginning. And then the process of harvesting their food, preparing it, presenting it, eating it with family, all of that can be a really beautiful artistic expression. So I want us to elevate real food production to the level of edible art. And that I think will really reframe or recontextualize a lot of food, because I don't believe in junk food. I don't eat it myself, and I don't believe in like this type of, like processed nonsense. I believe in and I support makers of food that make this very nourishing real stuff. So like I buy the honey that this local guy makes. I would buy this, even though I don't eat a lot of bread. I would buy that lady's sourdough, even though she doesn't sell it. So we need to support artisan food and art that is made in caloric art that is made out of these substances that are so incredibly valuable. And then, yeah, the activity of ingesting that artfully made food is the rapport with the artist. And it's a very, very beautiful thing, because when you make honey or bread, like you don't just want it to sit on a shelf and have no one eat it. You want someone to really eat it, love you, and love all of the care and flavors that you've put into that. And you can tell there's a big difference between homemade foods that are made with love and care, and mass produced foods that have zero intention, zero love, and zero good qualities. Art and food are very much on the same level for me. And I have a lot of friends who are artists also. Of the friends that I have who are artists, I also notice there's a lot of crossover. Like when you're an artist and you're involved in creative self-expression, it inherently is inevitably going to bleed through into your food choices and how you make things, because it's about like being very intentional. Like I'm not just going to buy any can of diced tomatoes. It has to be the good diced tomatoes made with the San Marzano tomatoes, and there's no preservatives, and then that's going to go in the sauce. Like you're very selective. Like when I make a red paint, it's because I can't just buy the regular red paint. It has to be a particular color, and that is what it is to be an artist. And even like with my clothing, the reason why I started my own clothing line was not only because I wanted to have another side business, like to make money, but also because I didn't find any of the clothing that I wanted to wear it freely available in this world. I would always do like looking for rainbow clothing. And, we joked, my shirt is like not that rainbow, but most of my clothing is like super rainbow. I could not find things that were rainbow enough. And also, I really only want to wear a garment if it has the rainbow in the right order. So if it was like red, purple, orange, green, yellow, blue, I'd be like, this rainbow is out of order. There's a lot of sweaters you can buy that are like that way. I'm like, I will not wear that rainbow. Totally out of order. So I was very limited in what was commercially available to me for clothing. So at a certain point, and after some encouragement, someone was like, you should make your own clothing. I was like, I should make my own clothing. So I started to design my own clothing. And that's really the genesis of that. So when you're an artist, it tends to expand into the aesthetics, expand into every level of your reality, and you're really not willing to be mediocre on any of these things. You'd be like, how about your toothbrush? Is your toothbrush rainbow? Yes, it is. That is correct. How about your dog food? No, we just feed my dog regular healthy dog food. It is not rainbow, but we try. She
You're
has a rainbow
talking
leash.
a rainbow leash. Oh, yes.
Totally.
You're talking about a concept I've heard of as a life artist. You just in
Beautiful. I
control of
like
every
that.
aspect, right?
Yes. Yes. I think that's a great phrase. I've never heard that before.
You are truly a life artist, Aurora.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm
I
inspired to
am.
make my own clothes now.
I want you to. Please do it.
Okay, a few more questions. So you're saying the realm that you come from, everyone is just creative and artistic. So is the word and role of an artist something that's specific to this earth realm? Like in Atlantis, for example, was everyone an artist just co-creating and creating all the time? And is yeah, like was it even a role because just everyone was doing it?
Absolutely. The word artist is relevant in this cultural context because not everybody is an artist. But in both ancient concurrent Atlantis and in the otherworldly higher dimension that I occupy, everyone is so innately creative that there is not a specific title that is called being an artist. So in ancient Atlantis, everyone is already a super athlete, like on the level of an Olympian, athletic, strong person. Everybody is already a genius, but a genius in their own unique way with their own intellectual gifts. And everybody is already an artistic genius in the sense of their beauty of their body and their appreciation and creation of beauty. And that beauty can be visual, auditory, oratory, sexual, all of these different categories of making beauty in the world. And so that is in a world that's analog to our world. Like people live in a world, have bodies of individuality. There are things like trees and, you can make paintbrushes or things like that. But then there's the higher dimensional world that I come from, where I'm purely a waveform. And in that world, we also are artists, even though we are not necessarily living in a planetary structure with physical bodies. What we are is more of a group of, like, a symphony of musicians, where we're constantly making these dance patterns with one another, jumping back and forth. And every time you move, your gesture makes beautiful colors and beautiful sounds. And you don't have a body limitation like here I have a face and arms and legs, but you have a different expansive level of your body being at that level. So your expression is in every moment. There is not a moment where you are not expressing. There is only you in your creative mode in your art studio, surrounded by everyone else who is in their creative mode in their art studio. So, like, to contrast, here in this world, sometimes I'm being an artist in my art studio, but sometimes I'm like loading the dishwasher because, like, I made some scrambled eggs and we got to clean up the kitchen, right? And that's not necessarily an artistic act. It's just kind of boring and choreful. Like, get this done so I can go do the fun creative stuff. But when I am a waveform in that level and layer of reality, we don't have these mundane chores like having to load the dishwasher and do a lot of other things just that are supportive of biological body needs, much less cleaning, much less chorefulness. So you don't have to be focusing time and energy on those non-creative, non-idealistic tasks. You can be 100% an artist all the time. And we also don't have commodities. So you're not like, well, like, I really want to be an artist, but I got to pay the bills. So I got to go out to my job now, but I'll see you guys in 8 hours when I come home and then I can art with you again. We don't have that level of commodity. And we would also never want someone to sacrifice who they truly are to get a job. We would not want anyone to get a job, kid. That would be like death. Like, if you did that in my world, we'd be like, stop sacrificing who you truly are for the purposes of commodification. You must not waste any moment of time, much less 8 hours of your day, on a pursuit that you're not deeply invested in. We have a totally different world. Because if you did that in this world, you would be what is called a starving artist. That is not ideal. So in order for me not to be a starving artist, clearly I had to do things in this world, like figure out how to make art books and how to make dresses and how to do online classes and all these different things. So yeah, I am now like wonderfully financially stable. I am not a starving artist, but in the world that I come from, what I'm talking about, where everyone is an artist, there is not a way to be a starving artist, because you don't have to have commodification in order to be sustained. What you have to have is total authenticity in order to be sustained. So if you weren't being your true self And if you were just doing something, just trying to get some money, everyone would be like this, like, we don't think you're being your true self, and you're just trying to do that thing to get some money. Like, stop it, be your true self, and that's it. There's no more discussion. So it's an inverted culture. Here you are celebrated if you negate yourself and do a bunch of things that you don't really believe in for money. They're like, good job, you got a kid. Good job, kid, you got a job. But when you're where I'm coming from, if you did that, that would be considered being very wrong and irresponsible. And what is responsible and correct is when you retain your own vision and your own authenticity and never change for the convenience of, the marketplace or anything like that. That would be unimaginable.
That makes so much sense. Um, so what happened during the fall of Atlantis that made us lose whatever quality that allowed us to follow that authenticity and for us to have to um, work for the big guy?
Yeah, that's such a great question. There actually was a time what you would call after the fall of Atlantis, or as humans have already come into levels of individuated embodiment in this level of reality, where you have to eat food to stay alive, and there is such a thing as death. There was a time before humans were domesticated, and you lived in this realm when you would never sell your time for money. That is the time when humans were truly free and truly feral. So you might remember it as a primal time, or a time of being a hunter-gatherer, or a simpler time. And it's often condescended to as like, yeah, you were living like a caveman, you were very advanced, but those were incredibly advanced levels of your being. And it happened sometime around the level of ancient Sumeria, when humanity was domesticated and it was strictly to get food, that the need for food. So the difference between this place and Atlantis is, in Atlantis, we all ate sunlight, and you are never going to starve. There's always going to be food. That's why you can't be a starving artist, because there's always going to be sunlight and you will always have it. So you don't have to worry. But here we're in this world where you need tangible food. And as soon as we entered into that type of a world, the controllers said, oh, look at that. They're vulnerable. They need physical, tangible food, where we're going to set up a quid pro quo where if you want food, you have to work. You have to give us time. You have to do the things we want to do. Before that arrangement, we did things that were voluntary because they made sense. Like, I want to walk someplace because I want to walk there, or I want to talk with someone because I have an interest in relationship with them, or I want to make a thing or do a thing because it interests me. But it was the incentivization due to food that created domestication. And from that domestication was the beginning of the loss of self. And that loss of self is evident in profound levels in your current culture, where people almost don't even learn who they are. It's not like becoming who you are and then learning who you are and then selling yourself out and getting a job. You don't even learn who you are from the beginning. They teach you from a little tiny child not to be your true self, and to do the things that will be commodifiable so that you can get a job, kid. And you don't even get a chance to figure out who you really are. And then what they do is they hold forth the hope that one day you will retire with your pension in many, many decades. Then you will get an opportunity to figure out who you really are. And by that point, many people are so dried out, have lost their soul, have lost their spark, even maybe have health problems, that they can't remember. And they're like, I'm retired, but I used to have creativity, but I don't know who I am now, but maybe I'll knit a sweater or something like that. And knitting is great, but that wasn't who they were originally. And they lost a lot through the negation of their self for maybe 40 or 50 years while they worked in a corporate infrastructure. It's hard to construct yourself as a beautiful artistic presence after 40 or 50 years, whatever. Maybe you worked at a bank or some other, rather uninspired position.
Right. And by that time, you've given so much of your soul energy that it's hard to recoup, right?
Definitely. People's bodies and their minds become habituated. So if you get habituated to like always sitting, your body muscles change. And then you get a body of almost always sitting. I mean, people sometimes wonder about why I'm always walking on the treadmill. And like, it helps me, regulate my brain and be inspired and keep my metabolism going. But also because like my body doesn't feel like a body of like an always sitting person. My body feels like a body of an always walking person. And that is what I do. Yeah, I didn't mention enough, like both in ancient concurrent Atlantis and pre-domesticated humanity times, like we walked all the time. We walked everywhere. Sitting for many hours a day was not something that we did at all. And so my identity and my sense of self is like always found that to be very not true to who I am. And so I've had to find ways to be able to, still be in the world even while I walk all the time, because that's not what everyone else is doing. Everyone else is like, we sit. What is wrong with you? I'm like, we're supposed to be walking more.
As I'm like sitting.
I
But
don't want to
I-
judge you.
no, I got a treadmill and I noticed that I can only walk on it when I'm doing very passive um, tasks that I know how to do without creatively thinking. And I'm like, oh, I'm not on the level of active thinking and creative thinking yet while walking. So
Get it.
I
I get
recognize,
it.
well, this is like a skill that like we need to build towards.
Totally. I'm sure that you will get it. And it is totally a skill. And I think that it involves levels of participation, like throughout the whole entire body. I think that's why I like doing it. Like I'm feeling like I'm using all layers of myself, even while I am doing some either communication with you or writing emails or doing some other computer thing. When I'm just doing a computer thing without moving my body is like this, like, I'm very bored, it's only going to last for 5 minutes because I'm getting very, very bored and I'm going to need to do something soon. So, and also some of this might be like my personality and my constitution, because I've always been very active and very uncomfortable, like not a good meditator, like sitting cross-legged and just meditating. I'm like, oh, I'm really bad at this, but I'm good at like walking meditations or dancing or something like that. So yeah, the more that I'm able to move and have that kind of like regular rhythmic action, then the happier and more comfortable my brain is. So yeah, that's kind of how I do it. And I also, if you wonder, like, how about painting? What do I do? Am I walking while I'm painting? Mostly what I do is I have my paintings horizontal and they're at about like chest level like this. And I'm usually standing and I kind of stand and I lean in and I paint. And then I go over here and I get more paint. So I'm always like taking a few steps, but I'm mostly standing. And then sometimes I sit for like 5 seconds to be able to do like one tiny little detail and then I jump up again. So my painting is very active. It's not like whatever sitting for 8 hours straight while I work on a particular little detail of the painting. And then also like I work on a quadrant. So I have these big giant panels. So I'm like standing, I work on a quadrant of my painting, and then I'm done with that color in that quadrant. Then I turn the entire thing, kind of like turning a pizza or whatever. So when I work, if I do like 8 hours painting my painting, it's actually a lot of like sit down, stand up, turn the painting, paint, 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 sit down, stand up, turn the painting, paint, paint. So I'm feeling like it's a very active process. It's not very it's not only static, but like when I have to do other things or have lived in other ways, like I felt very disconnected from my body. But when I do my painting and it's self-directed, I'm very connected to my body, and that body connection is actually a big part of what makes the art special. Oh, I'm back to my art diatribe. I didn't talk about this enough, but when I make my paintings, I'm using my whole body. So I have these big giant panels, and then I have like different, drawing tools. Some of my drawing tools are 48 inches. That's like my whole entire arm. So sometimes when I'm painting a painting, like you can even kind of see like this big long line that goes along like that. That's part of a circle that was 48 inches big. And in order for me to make that, I have to like put my whole body, I have to stretch my whole body. I have to do all of these different things. It is like a dance. And to me, it's not the same when I try to work on a computer with like, we're just going to work with little pixels and put this together and this together and this together. And I can make an image, but it feels so constrained. Everything about it, like my body feels small. My eyes are squinting. My hands are squinting. And at a certain point, I'm like, oh, like this is too small and too constrictive. Like I need to get big. And because if you wonder, like, why make these big giant panels and why do it in this way? It feels very comfortable to me. It is the size of my body, and I'm working with these big circles and figure eights and movements across the canvas that feel good and comfortable to me. And that's why like I'm not really, making like the way that a jeweler would make like one little tiny thing and stare at one little tiny thing all day long. Like that's not what my stuff is like. Like it's actually very active, very big, very expansive, and I learn a lot from my putting my whole body into it. And that painting expressions are the expression of my whole body.
And also, there's just so much detail in everything you're trying to convey that it needs to be that size, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Totally, totally helps. Yep.
well, I was looking through the images in your book, and I realized
Yeah.
that I didn't have a context on the size of it. And so that's when I was like, oh, I really need to see all of your pieces in person, especially since I saw a snapshot of an angle of one of your pictures. I think it was on your
Yeah.
social media, and I realized there are aspects about your work that I can't see because this is a 2D image. Like you, there's some clear raised dot patterns on one of them, and I was like, whoa, there's more. And so that was when I was
Got
like,
it.
yeah, I really need to see everything in person. Because those are all
You're totally
intentional
invited.
aspects of what you're trying to convey as well, right?
Yes. Yes. So I developed that dot technique and created my own formula of paint that when you put it on the surface, it doesn't lay down flat. It kind of makes these little mountains or whatever. So yeah, I developed that over many years. And this was my philosophy. So that was like kind of 2008 to 2013 or so. Um, Artwork that was generated by computers and printed out was just starting to become more popular at that time. And I realized I need to distinguish my artwork from artwork that is simply a printout from, a laser printer or something like that. What can I do to a painting that makes it above and beyond what a simple reproduction is? And so I figured out that I could create these polymers and create this texturized surface of the painting that it not only adds information, because like some of my paintings, I might have something that you see from like head on, but then when you see the light coming across the side, other imagery will jump forward because it's made out of these dots. So I'm able to kind of play with the interplay of more information in there, but also like no machine can be an imposter and make one of my paintings. Like if you make a painting that's just totally flat, then you can pretty much have like a machine, you take an image that's high quality photograph and just have a big giant printout. Maybe even it's on a printer, maybe this big, like not just a small one, but a big giant industrial size printer. And then you kind of get a copy of your painting, but you'll never get that in making a copy of my paintings because they have so much on the surface. They have texture. And sometimes I've even embedded little tiny Herkimer crystals, like these little tiny quartz crystals on the actual surface of the painting. Because when I make a painting, it is literally a portal, it is a magical implement, it is a magical energy field, and the crystals emphasize that. And all of this was very intentional because I realized, again, like my competition in air quotes is kind of like what a computer can create. And I needed to create something that was more impressive or that people could connect with more effectively than stuff that was just computer generated, kind of like, what is the purpose for your being, Aurora? I'm like, well, I make things that are beyond what even a computer can make. And that is still the job of an artist, even now with AI and things like that. And that's also why I elevate food. Like, for a little while, I was doing my own broccoli sprouts business. And I did that intentionally because I'm like, something? I'm going to do something else that a computer cannot do effectively. I'm going to grow food. It is totally an art form to like grow or sprout like microgreens or little broccoli plants so that you can eat them. Because the plants talk to you and they don't always need the same amount of water, and it's not just something that can be easily automated. So it's very reductionist. Just be like, oh yeah, just like set it up your magical grow room, and then the plants will grow when the machine gives them water, and then they'll be done in 5 days and come back in 5 days again. I'm like, no, you will have death. Nothing will be alive because It's an artistic act to coax a garden into existence. It is not something that is merely mechanistic. So to grow your own food is miraculous. And then something like sourdough, that is taking care of a living being. Like you have a child. When you do sourdough, like you have another member of the family, you will have to take care of it. It's not the same as like some dead recipe. You know what I'm talking about? Like you have to feed it this, then it's hot, then it's cold, then you need to drain this, then you need to do a thing. It's a lot, and you can't just go away on vacation. You need to be like, someone take care of my sourdough starter. I'll be away for this many days. Take care of my baby. But that's an art form. You're really creating microorganisms to grow and to ferment, and then turning it dough. You can, of course, get a stand mixer and mix dough, but this is not the same as mixing dough by hand. It is not the same as the elasticity and the care that is put into creating the gluten crumb of a dough. It's better when you make it by hand. How about croissants? The multi-folded layered dough. It's very complex for people to make that, but they do it by hand and it comes out amazing. There is something about the care and the attentiveness of a human being creating these dough structures that is not easily mimicked by a machine, even though I know there's plenty of industrial bakeries and their bread is all crap. Can we just agree to this? Like all of that bread, it's not even just that they've sprayed it in glyphosate and all this bad stuff or whatever, but even before all of that stuff, you could tell there was a big difference between like the white Arnold brand sandwich bread that comes pre-sliced in a bag versus the authentic whole like French baguette that someone kneaded and made, and a real baker made that stuff. Like, I'm sorry if you guys work for Arnold Bread Company. I don't think their bread is good. It's dead bread. It is not alive bread. So some things are an art form. Bread, cheese, and wine. I'm not that much about the cheese and the wine. I'm actually not that much of a bread eater either. But I'm bringing this up because, like in Europe, and I've not really been there very much at all, so please don't take me as an expert. But all of the creation of those types of foods are seen as art forms. It's not merely like, how can I make the cheapest bread possible to sell it in a plastic bag so that Americans can make their sandwiches to go to school or work? That is like the American way. But in Europe, they're like, no, our bread is sacred and we will not be spraying crappy chemicals on it. And we will be having artisans who work their whole life to perfect what it is to make a croissant, make this pastry for you. And that is like something that you should celebrate. And same thing with their wine, and same thing with just the aesthetic of making foods. It is about putting all of your energy into making it the best way, as opposed to making it the cheapest, most mediocre way possible. That's the American way.
Being a consumer for most of my life and being born into just mass consumerism, I wasn't able to personally appreciate craftsmanship until I started taking the classes on how to make things. And it really actually makes living more enjoyable when you appreciate and know the energy that goes behind things, and not mass produce things, but when a human can do it, it really elevates living. It's something so simple, just as appreciation. And maybe that's why people are like, oh, like be grateful, be grateful. But you can't just be grateful. You have to know how something's done to tether yourself in that way, right? And also I want to
I
mention,
want to tell me,
oh,
but I agree with your point. Tell me more.
so when I started wilderness therapy, we had to do mostly everything ourselves, and everything was made from scratch. Even the spoons, the utensils that we had to take from a tree and carve for hours, or at least it took me hours, and it was just a crappy spoon. And other people have very beautiful spoons, and you held on to that spoon. And when someone gifted you a spoon, it meant something. So it was just a spoon. I never knew it could mean so much, but yeah, you really have to have your hands into something before you can kind of connect to everyone around you and also everything else that you use around you every day. And I think that's something that's very profound about being a creator yourself.
And that contrast that building your own spool or carving your own bowl, and the gratitude levels that you experience there with the fast food, fast, non-nourishing culture that we're in, where not only is like the food very chemically made by automation and then eaten with plastic cutlery and usually eaten in a car. Usually the car is moving. Like every single aspect of that is reducing the artfulness of the nourishment and dumbing it down. And then it makes the person less intelligent as well. And you're correct. There was another time, a pre-industrialized time, when people valued everything more because everything was made by someone that you knew and had a personal touch to it. So that might be everything from like your cutting board, because I know you've been experimenting with like, making cutting boards. So your kitchen implements, how about even like a knife? Mostly now, like you buy a knife and it's like, oh, this knife got dull. I'll throw it away and buy a new one over at whatever, Target or Walmart or whatever. But it used to be like, so it was some guy's job to make a knife. And then when it got dull, you brought it back to that guy and he made it sharp for you again. Like people took pride in what they created and it was made to last for a long amount of time. And then other things were even like personalized, like, clothing or shoes that was made personalized, but you didn't buy a new dress every day or go shopping at the mall because you were bored. Like a dress was important and someone made it for you and they gathered pine needles to dye the fabric the color that you like all of these things were really, really different in that time. And in this time and place, people are maybe they can't be blamed so much for like being very checked out and very benumbed because there's so little here that is personalized and of value. Like if you look at like children, like they're going to be given a Happy Meal, they're going to eat it with plastic cutlery, they're going to eat it in the car. All of this from an early age kind of is about the disposable culture and not about things that truly last, or other things like furniture. Furniture used to be something that was handcrafted by a family member and you took it with you no matter where you lived or passed it on to your children. And now furniture is like super cheap and you get it from IKEA and it fits in your apartment. And then when you move, you leave it by the side of the road. I get a lot of good things from the side of the road because I'm like, yeah, like that guy didn't need it anymore. I need that table. But this is all really, really different than being like a table that is meaningful or customized to you in some way. All of these things that we have in our life. So I would say, except for like major industrialized things, we could move to a micro economy where you would be able to have like your clothing, your shoes, your tables, and your spoons made by community members. But some things are larger and require like a manufacturing, like if here in my room, like if you look, there's a heater that is like, the wall heater that's part of this. Like you're not going to have the guy down the street like make a wall heater for you. Like you need a factory. Some things you need a factory to make for you or cast iron pans or whatever it is. But I would say whatever, probably 75% of the items that we use in our life, we could be making for one another on an artisanal level. So that brings me to someplace like a craft place like Etsy. I have an Etsy shop and I think that they're a good company. I know they've been like co-opted and now they're diluted and they're not as great as they once were. But I bring that up because that was one of those things that was like a door was opened for artists, artisans, and craftspeople with the creation of that marketplace that you could find a place to sell your stuff. Because it's hard if you're going to like make carved spoons and just sell spoons at a certain point, like everybody in your neighborhood has one, and you're like, okay, I'm out of business. But if you can sell it to other places, then you can have a whole thriving business by making these carved spoons. So I really do try to support individual makers of making things that are unique and individual in order to be able to have those objects in my life. But it can be hard because like this one lady makes these really, really nice rainbow mugs and I want that mug, but it's like $700. I'm like, that's a lot. When I'm making my coffee in the morning, like I am not that coordinated. I would feel so sad if I broke a $700 mug. Like I've broken plenty of mugs. So it's the only reason I have not bought her beautiful mug. Like that's an art piece. I don't even think I can take the pressure using that because I do break things sometimes. But you understand. But we would have to recalibrate from, a mug is like $10 to a mug is $700. I have to be like, nobody touched my coffee. This is the most expensive drinks container I've ever had. Yeah.
Maybe we can encourage her to make one made of metal or something.
That would be beautiful. Well, you know why has to charge so much because it's a ceramic process. So it's not just about the quality of the clay, but it's also the kiln. It's something that has to be glazed, fired several times. And then there's also a lot of artistry in the rainbow details of putting this different glaze on. So I'm glad that she charges the amount that she charges. I don't want people to think that I'm being judgmental or that I require her to drop her prices at all. I just want you to know in the morning, like especially before I put in my contact lenses or whatever, like I am not coordinated. And that is when coffee is being made, and I need like a safety cup that will not fall or break over or anything like that.
I'll keep an eye out for you, Aurora, for a
Good.
beautiful, a more affordable custom rainbow mug. Okay, just a few more
Awesome.
questions here from earlier. One of them, you said that a good artist is supposed to be a part of the culture and inspire the culture to be better. So, who do you think and admire that embodies this and has been influential to culture through their art?
It's a tough question. You're putting me on the spot because although I do love and celebrate the work of Alex Gray, I don't know if he fits in all of those categories of like influencing culture and influencing other people to, be better people. Oh my goodness. I don't know. I might be drawing a blank. I'm going to have to think on this one. Oh, this is a tough question. I'm not because I'm like because there's lots of artists that I think like that's a good artist. They're technically proficient, but they're not necessarily doing all of the things that you listed in terms of inspiring other people with their value system. And same thing with musicians. Like I like a lot of people's music, but I wouldn't necessarily be like, yes, and they're living their fullest life and you know teaching other people how to be better. They're not necessarily role models. That's what I'm trying to say. So sometimes people can be a great artist or a great musician, and they're not necessarily a role model in everything that they're doing or everything that they're encouraging others to do.
Okay, well, I mean, since you mentioned music, that is a great example. Like maybe in their own life, it's not the best example, but music itself has inspired many, many people on a sad day or inspired them to take up music. I would say that's a great example. But while we're talking about Alex Gray, I've never heard of Alex Gray. It seems like he has influenced you a lot. Can you share more about what your thoughts are on Alex Gray?
Well, he is a visionary artist and he is still very active, and he is really considered like one of the grandfathers of the present level of visionary art that is available in our world. He does somewhat espouse and promote the psychedelic experience, as that's what inspired his earlier work. And so he's been a part of the psychedelic community, and a lot of that has grown up around him. And so I'm not necessarily a huge proponent of psychedelic drugs, even though people look at my stuff and they look at me and they think like that girl takes a lot of psychedelic drugs. It's not true. I am actually not allowed to take psychedelic drugs because of my brain and because of having epilepsy. So I have to protect my brain and not take those types of things. But I see all this stuff naturally. But he was inspiring to me when I was a very new artist here, like let's say around 2006 or so. So I'd only been here for 5 years, like being a kindergartner. And I used to think that I was the only person that was seeing energy on the level that I do. And then the first time I saw his artwork, I was like, oh, this guy is seeing the same stuff that I'm seeing. And of course, he's translating it differently, but I could tell he was seeing the same stuff. And so it was very validating to me. And I'm like, oh, there are people here who are seeing this. And then from connecting to his work, I then found other people who were visionary artists that are working in a similar vein, but not exactly the same. So I think that he's a great role model in the sense of staying true to his vision, creating community, creating a niche, not trying to dumb himself down to be more palatable or commercial for any other purpose. But the things that I don't necessarily agree with are some like drug use, some questionable symbology, and maybe some of the hedonism of the community that has grown up around him. Again, like I'm not judging him, but like he has like different parties and gatherings and things like that that some people use like just as an excuse to take a lot of wild drugs, which is like that's you're doing your thing, but I'm just not into that much. just don't want people to think that I'm like a square, but I'm a rhomboid. I'm like not totally a square, but I am not totally a psychedelic person. But so yeah, I think that he's doing some good stuff. And when I think about music, a lot of musicians have very troubled lives and very troubled emotional states, and also sometimes substance abuse, and they are not perfect people. That there are many musicians where their artistic expression has inspired me in the moment that I needed it. Sometimes it was collaboration, like, oh, like commiseration, like, oh, like they feel this way too. Like it can be a lot when people feel alone, lonely, and isolated. And they feel like I'm the only person who's ever felt this bad feeling before. And then you listen to a song and you're like, no, this person who sang this song felt just like me, and I'm not alone. Like that's big. It can help you to keep going in life. And then also, a lot of the time, I get inspired by artists that make like fun dance music because I am a dancer, and that's a big part of my personal artistic expression too. And I love it when I have like music has a beat and it gives me energy and it makes me go. But then sometimes I listen to the words or I find out about their life and I'm like, I do not agree to that, because there's a lot of questionable things that are going on in people's lives and their personal lives and their sexuality that I'm like, I don't agree to that. Or certain lyrics that are about like, I do not agree to that, but I like the way their music makes me feel. So it's a tall order to be an artist on the level that I was just sharing with you about, to be an inspirer and a cultural hero or a cultural icon is different than just like making a cool song that makes you feel like you want to dance. So just probably my brain is tired, so I'm drawing a blank now, but I have to think of like who is a really good example of someone who stayed true and did really amazing things. It's funny, what someone who's coming up, he's not necessarily a musician, but John Trudell, he is Native American. He's not on Earth anymore. He's passed on, but he wrote a lot of poetry that he also put to music. Like you can find his stuff on Apple Music. I think he kind of fits the bill of what we're talking about. He was an activist. He spoke very authentically and very articulated about his expression, who he is in the world and what his viewpoint and what his cultural beliefs are. And he was so truthful in his artistic expression of the things that he talked about, like the domestication of humanity and what it is to be free and what it is to be feral, and the diminishment of human soul in the world. And I think he did that with a great amount of artistry. And he was also very like connected to humanity. He wasn't like, I'm a weird, distant loner. Like there's a lot of artists, they get famous and then they're like, now I live in the Hollywood Hills, dress really weird, like never connect with anyone. And, like he didn't get that way. He was like connected to his community, accessible, sane and connected to the world, and also a wonderful, I think, viewpoint and critic of the world. But you're not necessarily going to put on his stuff and like have disco dance. Like he's not that type of stuff. But, he, in terms of activism and having a voice, in terms of pure artistry, I already mentioned Terry Riley is pretty amazing, just as pure artistry, very inspiring as a musician. And he's still alive on Earth. One of the dead artists that I think is pretty amazing is John Coltrane. Again, he had a very troubled drug-fueled existence and did not do a lot of things right, but his saxophone playing was awesome. And when I needed to learn about complex music in this world, like he was the person that I went to. That was when I first came here as Aurora. And of course, I listened to pop music and things that were freely available on the radio. But as soon as I started to be able to access music of my choice, instead of what was just playing popularly, I was like, I need to listen to the good stuff. Where's the good stuff? And I got the box set. I didn't buy it. I borrowed it from the library, the heavyweight champion box set of this guy. He's a musical effing genius. And I listened to that whole thing over and over and over, literally while I was making that sculpture in the background there, because I was working on it and I had my hands all full of like plaster and I couldn't touch the CD player. So I just put it in and pressed repeat. And then the same songs kept on going over and over. And I just kept that going for many days while I made that whole thing. And I'm telling you, it had a profound and transformative effect. And I think that is a perfect example of how you can be imperfect as a person, but perfect as an artist. John Coltrane's music had a wonderful, uplifting, deep impact upon me. It was about the perfection of the notes that he chose and the way that he played it. It didn't matter to me in the moment, like whether or not he took drugs or what his relationship with his wife was like or what his fellow musicians thought of him or anything like that. It was just about the music that I felt. So it is possible to have a positive impact on people's lives or on your culture, even if you're not a perfect person. And I think most people are kind of a little bit screwed up. So whatever you would call it, a high hurdle to have to jump over to be like, I'm a perfect person and I make perfect artwork and everybody look up to me. And that's what an artist is. You can be a flawed person and still be a great artist.
Well, we don't know what came first, um, like his ability and receptivity to be able to um, filter all of his life experiences into beautiful art, and then maybe there's some sort of manipulation of his energies because of what he could put out into the world, and maybe someone tried to take that to the next level and contract him to evil companies and take advantage of him. We don't really know, right?
This is
But like the ability for him to output
totally,
that music, that's him. His true self, not just the
totally,
human self
totally,
that we look at.
totally,
That's
totally. I
amazing that
agree.
you
It's
were
his
drawn to
soul.
Coltrane because they teach babies or they have whole albums for babies so that they develop in the womb and just become very, I don't know, deep
Yeah.
babies once they're born.
That's right. If you want to have a deep baby, play it John Coltrane in the womb with the little headphones on your belly. You will have a wild child. That is amazing. I think you really were very making a great point there, Len, about very sensitive artist souls who come into this world who then get twisted, distorted, and exploited by the people around them who are like, hey, you can sing or you can play or you're an amazing person. Here's a bunch of white powdery drugs. Go wild. Like sometimes it's the people around them that are doing bad things to them and they don't have the ability to resist and the boundaries to be able to not be dragged down by the crappy mediocrity and substance abuse of the people around them. So yeah, and I think that John Coltrane didn't always, be a drug abuser. I think that was like a part of his life, but not the defining characteristic of him throughout his whole entire musical repertoire. I think he had a very, very long, good career during which sometimes he was very stable and not taking a lot of drugs.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about other people's art, and now
Yeah,
let's talk about your art. So, um, many people probably don't know that you do everything by hand, and today I just learned that you do most of your art standing up. It's
yeah,
very, very intricate, and
yeah.
there's also it's not just ideas in your head, it's what you're seeing on the etheric realms. These are actual portraits that you are representing through the paint medium.
Yes,
I mean, that's
absolutely.
amazing. So these
Ask
are
me anything. Ask me
these
what.
are etheric portraits. Um, are
That's
these,
right.
would you, I know many of them are what you say, these are portraits of people. So each person has an auric field and everything. So is this the
Right.
ratio is smaller than like a human sized portrait. Would you ever consider doing a
Yes.
to scale portrait of all of this? I know it's like a lot of detail, and I don't know how big that portrait would be because the fields are much larger than the human body itself.
That's right. Then I would absolutely love to expand the scale of my artwork. And in order to do so, I simply need to have more resources and a larger studio. So let's cook that up. Let's make that a request to the cosmic infrastructure. Energy flows to excellence. Aurora needs a bigger studio. One of the reasons why I've been self-limiting at a 48-inch square is because that is the size that I can fit in the back of a truck, like the need to transport my pieces. So it's in my bedroom. You can't see it, but I originally, years ago, made this big giant piece that is made out of all of these hand painted tiles that is on a big giant piece of plywood. It weighs a lot. It is very heavy. It is very unwieldy, and it's too big to be able to fit in like a standard, pickup truck or something like that. And I have had so many difficulties carrying that painting around. So I didn't know, because when I first came here, I made all of these very impractical art projects, and not all of them survived because like I used to paint on glass, and a lot of those pieces broke. And I love the quality of painting on glass because it's very similar to like painting with pure light. But I learned glass is difficult to transport and then can be very fragile. And then I also designed and accomplished this piece with all of the hand painted tiles, and it looks great. And it's definitely going to last the ages. Like that thing, like nothing is going to break that painting. It is whatever, built like a truck. But it weighs so much. And when I first created it, I was living in Woodstock in a little tiny apartment that I couldn't even get it up the stairs to my apartment. So luckily, I knew someone who was a gallerist who had kind of celebrated my strange artwork. And she was like, yeah, like store your thing in my place. She's like, look, I know you can't get that up into your apartment. Why don't you just store it over here? And we just like got some guys to help us like carry it down the street. It's so big and so heavy. So I bring that up in order to say at a certain point, I got smarter. I became less naive and more practical. And I was like, look, if I'm going to make these paintings, I have to make sure that I don't need to have like five guys to be able to carry the painting down the street, and make certain that it can fit into a vehicle so I can drive it to places where it needs to go. And so that's when I figured out I can make a 48-inch square, because plywood comes roughly in a 90-inch long sheet, and you can cut it in half or get the guys at the lumberyard to do that for you. And then that's a good standard size. So for over 10 years, that has been like a bow to practicality for me. But if I had millions of dollars and no limitations, I would absolutely love to have a nice, big, giant studio, be able to work on much, much larger panels. And yes, to make some things that are at the same scale as the human body, like an energy field that's as big as the human body, and also make some immersive art projects that are so big that I don't know if you know that painting, Monet's Water Lilies. It's many panels, and it's meant to represent his garden. And when you're standing in front of it, like you feel like you're in a garden, because it just like fills up the whole entire space and has this beautiful light. So yeah, I've always envisioned what it would be like if I could make a big giant thing like the size of a whole entire wall in a warehouse. And then when you're in front of that, it's like being in this ocean. Because when I experience these patterns, I experience them in the ocean of consciousness. So I definitely don't experience them like in a tiny Instagram viewpoint on my phone. I experiencing it as something that fills up the whole entire force field all around me. And that's also why I was very interested in something like the technology in the Sphere Amphitheater in Las Vegas. Because I'm like, oh, you can make an immersive thing. But then I'm like, I don't approve of the immersive things that they're making. This is not at the level that I want, but I would make a cool immersive thing. But boy, oh boy, I would love to be able to work on a larger scale. And also, I would like to be able to experiment with some other forms of translucent materials. So you can see I've been painting on wood, which is opaque, but I use very particular paints and techniques to give it a luminosity. But why I originally loved making those glass paintings when I first came here into your world is because it's very pure light. And I learned there is this stuff that you can get that is like a non-yellowing plexiglass acrylic sheet that won't break. So you can get paints, and you can paint also in layers. Like if you can imagine many layers of clear acrylic sheet lined up, and the different complexities that you can get as the overlapping layers and colors come through there. So that is still on the table. Like if people, what I would ask for anybody who's listening to this or whatever, send me your good wishes. This is not like sending me dollars. Like this is not about a GoFundMe campaign. Send me your good wishes that would be like Aurora will get what she is requesting from the cosmos, and hopefully soon, like, not within 50 years, but sooner rather than later, so that way I can make good use of it. And that would be a dream come true. And I've thought about like working in glass and kind of glass foundries and things like that. I think I have to say no thank you, just because they're very dangerous. And I didn't even always know about that, but glass paint is very bad to breathe in, and glass foundries, like things blow up all the time and you can get burned and stuff like that. So I now know I have to be a lot more protective of my body so that way I can still be here in the world nice and healthy for a long amount of time without, I can't get exposed to a lot of chemicals. I can't have like burning hot glass, whatever, explode in my vicinity. So I have to make accommodations of finding safe materials to be able to still get a great effect.
I have been witnessing a lot of very fast and beautiful manifestations, and I think a big part of it is extracting it from the ambiguities of all the energies in your mind and just saying it out loud to yourself, but also in this video, everyone will hear it. And I really do believe that we will be seeing all of those works from you.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Thank you to the future people who are seeing this video and who send me that energy. Yeah, it's a well-being, like a loving kindness, a generosity of spirit to wish for others, like, to be able to receive what you need to receive so you can grow to your greatness. And I'll do good things, I promise. Like, I will make good, valuable, worthwhile art pieces that are worth the investment of resources in what I have access to. I mean, that's big. I want you to know, I do things because they are important and gratifying to me as an artist, but I also really do things that are community oriented because I want them to have an impact and an uplift and a nourishment for others. So if for artists who are listening, that's also an important message. You straddle the line of doing some aspect of your art creating because it is personally gratifying and you just like it and you just do it for you, but you do some aspect for the person who's going to come along and see or listen to your stuff many years later. Because sometimes I've created projects for myself where it was actually very annoying to do. And I was in the middle of the project and I was like, this is so boring. Why am I doing this? I hate this so much because it's really hard. Like what I do is really, really hard. And sometimes I'm like, oh, like that part looks this part looks terrible. This part looks terrible. Blah, blah, blah. Why am I doing this? I'm getting all like, and it's like, I'm doing it because I'm going to show it to people and people are going to really love it. And then sometimes those have been my best paintings and they had a big impact on other people. And I know that they uplifted and changed lives. So the annoyance and tedium was worth it for me to make something that served my community. So keep that in mind. Artists have to do things that's fun for you, but then also hopefully things that will be valued by others.
So you spoke of desiring a mobile art tour. Did
Oh, yeah,
I hear that right? Can I hear more about that and
absolutely.
what that looks
Thank
like?
you. Yeah. So I've thought about this a lot. You don't really have a financial model for what I want to do, so I don't have the words for it. But what usually, like, let's say you're, I want to say like a rich person, you're a person who has a lot of resources. And you're like, okay, I like that painting. I want to buy that painting. Here, kid, here's $1 million and counting off my cash, giving it over to you. And now you give me that painting, I stick it on a truck and I drive it home. Bye bye. See you later. And I want to have a totally different relationship with the people who support my work. Like I would be very, very happy to have art supporters who contribute towards what I'm doing, but without owning my artwork as a commodity. So the difference is like, let's say someone wants to give me $1 million and buy a painting. And then what if they want to use it for shooting practice or to soak it with kerosene and set it on fire? Like, I know terrible people do things though. I would never be okay with that. Just like, what if you had a dog that had puppies and you sell the puppies and then find out they're being used as bait dogs for like dog fighting? You're like, I am not okay with this. Like, no, this puppy is meant to go to a good home, not to be used for a snack for a bigger dog, right? So yeah, no, I'd be very, very selective. I would not be okay if someone wanted to either destroy my artwork or the worst case would be to sequester it and keep it hidden away. What if you were a rich whatever, a person and rich introvert, and you're like, yep, I'm going to bring this painting home. I'm going to stick it in my vault and no one's ever going to see it again. And I would be like, that also is not acceptable to me. So the provisions that I would need, because before I even jump into that, the motivation behind most art buyers is to invest in something that will grow into the future. And that is how they're looking at it. They're like, you're an artist. I believe in you. I want to buy a piece of you. I want to save it in my vault. And then when you die, my thing will get more expensive. And I'm like, okay, thank you for wanting to support my work, but we have to do this in a completely different way where you don't take my artwork home with you or display it in your own personal, living room or something like that. And the artwork is displayed as a total, comprehensive vision with the other panels as well. And ownership of an individual piece would be more like considered analogous to contribution to the entirety of the art expression. So I'm loosely calling it an art trust, even though I don't think the word trust is really there. But here is my goal, that the paintings all stay together, that I am supported so that I can continue to make more panels, because I haven't given you the end of the story. Like every single one of these panels is part of a chapter in a story, and I'm taking you somewhere as the viewer, and the story isn't over. And I intend to be here for many, many more decades, making more panels that will add to the story. But in order to make those panels, I need to be working on painting panels and not working on my many multiple side gigs, even though, I make good side gigs and I do good stuff, but I have to, at a certain point, drop all of that and focus entirely on painting. Because even if I do nothing other than paint, a painting can take a year to make. And that's if I have 0 side gigs. And then with side gigs, a painting can take several years to make. So I need to be able to be sustained in making more paintings. And also, I need to retain ownership of the paintings. When people talk about a trust, it is setting up an artificial entity that would then own the paintings. That is not what I want. And artists and musicians, take heart and listen to this. Your artistic expressions are expressions of your soul, and you should own your soul. Oh, you should keep control of the originals. So what I mean is, I want to, make sure, like if I had 12 panels go into the Aurora Trust, then it means that an entity called Aurora Trust owns those 12 panels, and then I don't own my paintings anymore. And my shoulders would go down. I'd be like, I spent all these years like making these paintings. Like I own these paintings. I don't want to stop that just so that I can put bread on my table. So I want to maintain the ownership of my paintings and also the right to reproduce my paintings. These are two separate things, because when you sell a painting, sometimes you can be like, okay, rich person, you may buy my painting, but I maintain the right to reproduce. That means I can make dresses, calendars, pillowcases, whatever I want out of this, and you just own the original. Of course, if you're a actualized self-actualized artist, you maintain all of your originals. You're like, yep, here's all the originals, and then I make these posters or dresses or other stuff off of it, and I sell those things. And I would definitely sustain the activity of my art exhibit through selling reproductions of it. But so instead of a wealthy person doing the traditional thing, which is I want to buy one of your panels and then have it increase in value and then sell it again later, I would ask for a contribution to the overarching art entity that is this exhibit. That if a person wanted to be a part of my art world or contribute to my career or support this artwork getting out there, they would make this contribution. But it's not the same as like investing in Bitcoin. Like you buy a Bitcoin and then 10 years later, like you're going to have more money than you started out with. It's not necessarily at the same level, because I think that you can't just be motivated by like the profit motive and commodification when it comes to my work. I would only want to affiliate with a very selective, motivated type of person that is not just someone who's wealthy trying to become wealthier. Like that is not who I came here to serve in this world. So someone who's in recognition of who I am, in alignment with my vision, and willing to make a contribution, but without necessarily having a profit motive, who would like to support and sustain these things. And what do I need? the first thing I need is a display space. So that would be a large enough space to be able to contain the 12 panels plus the supportive drawing materials. I have life-size drawings that are the sketches that I did for all of them too, that should also be displayed at the same time. And all of this, there's real insurance that has to be, you got to make sure you have fire insurance, fire, theft, disaster, because my panels are really, really valuable to me. So I need to make sure that they have all of the insurance so that that way nothing bad will happen to them. And you have to have a security guard. Like if you have a lot of expensive art in one place, you can't just be like, okay, like the door is open to the public, anybody come in. Like you got to make sure that people don't come in with the intention to vandalize it and to do anything naughty. So you have to have someone who is there as a security guard. And then the final thing is, in this exhibit, I want to also include my music. So I want to have the visual panels that I've already created, and I have a lot of music that I've innovated over the years, and I want to have that music playing while people are able to look at the panels. And then sometimes I will do a formal art, like artist talk that would be scheduled at a particular time. And sometimes I would do a performance that is one of my Flying Rainbow Lasagna dance performances there in front of my artwork, like with my music playing, as creating this energy field. But that is not the same as like being a dancer on a stage. This is more of a sense of like a different level of sharing and also a spontaneous phenomenon. Like, so people would contribute to this exhibition by paying an entry fee, much like you would when you go to a museum, like $20 or some nominal fee. The exhibit would also be supported through the sales of clothing and art books and other things that are, reproductions of the original stuff that I do. And it also at some point will be a traveling exhibit, because it's not just meant to be like for people of the United States or people of California. It is really meant to be for many different communities. And that's it. That's the next level, to be able to, just to create, like to carefully wrap up my paintings for transit is a huge proposition. It's a huge proposal to make sure that things are transported safely and that they are looked over and have the insurance and the security in the new place where they go to, and that everything is set up and overseen and managed correctly. That's actually it requires like a couple of people that I need to be in my art. I need to be in my art studio painting the next panels. I cannot be traveling all around with this and then sitting there and babysitting it the whole entire time. I will be there for some of the time, but some of the time I need to be painting my painting. And maybe I might have some live painting that I do. Like some artists are really doing live painting at music shows, but my painting is so boring to look at that I don't think anyone would want to watch me live painting, because I was like, okay, like gonna be for like a tiny little dot over here. Like, okay, come back in 10 years. I'll be partially done. Like it's slow. All right. It's not like some wild expressive thing. So, but I've thought about that. Like, well, what if I had my studio there? Then I would be happy to babysit the exhibit and make sure everybody acted correctly. But also my art making, I'm not good with interruptions because it's so reliant upon patterning. And sometimes I need to remember, like, okay, I'm painting this particular color in all of these areas that are through here. And then someone interrupts me. And then I'm like, I forgot what I was trying to do. Like, I don't know where it's like losing your place in your knitting. So I don't think that it would be ideal for me to be, an artist in my studio on display while I'm also babysitting my exhibit. But I think that would be too distracting for me. So we'd need to have trusted people who could administrate this and who could make sure that the paintings were not damaged. And then I would come in and do performances and art talks. I think those are the basics of it. What do you think?
I think you have a very clear vision on what you want. That's beautiful. So we just need a space right now, right?
Exactly. Well, a space
Uh-huh.
and the financial resources to be able to rent the space, and
Mhm.
it should be rented for at least like 6 months, maybe a year, because then resources to be able to create and transport my artwork to the space. because it's a big deal to take them off the wall and make sure they don't get damaged and make sure that they're packed up properly and then get to the proper place. So that level of security needs to be withstood. And so yes, like if a person wanted to, instead of buying a painting, invest in this exhibit so that that way the artwork could be seen. It's the motivation is not merely for an individual person to profit or grow their investment portfolio, but it is to be able to serve the community by bringing this imagery to be accessible to people in the world who otherwise wouldn't be able to travel to my studio and see it.
Okay, let's find a space and see how much it'll cost, and let's set up something for people to contribute, because maybe no one
I
knew
would
this is
love
what you
that.
wanted, and
I would love that.
let's do it.
Definitely, definitely. And let's have people contribute and have the budget for at least a 6-month exhibit before the paintings get moved, because it would not be good to move them for 1 month and then have to move them back here after a one. I cannot do a 1 month show. That is not in the budget. Like that is not the right energy budget. The right energy budget is to say it's a big deal to move my paintings. And yeah, they have to be lifted and carried in very special ways, that way they're not injured. So yeah, it's a
Okay.
big deal to move them.
So you said during the 6 month period, you would be having a lot of events and appearances at your
Yeah.
studio, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I
Well,
bet a lot of
at the exhibit,
at
I
the
would paint
okay.
in a studio. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, let's plan more of this. Um,
Good.
okay. That was a beautiful description. It's like you already know exactly what you want.
I
Um,
totally know what I want.
okay. I guess my last question is, do you have any more comments on art? I know you could talk all day about it. Anything
Good.
else you want to
Good.
share?
Good. Mostly I have a message to like other art makers that are out there, because I feel like I'm also a really good creative mentor about how to be invested in a project and see it through to its completion. And what it is to be a visionary is more than just like having a flash of inspiration on the inside and then painting, for in a fevered expression, and then boom, like out comes the painting. Like for me and what I can share and encourage towards others is that you get that initial burst. That's a burst of inspiration inside of you, but that's like the spark that lights a campfire. And then it takes a lot of consistent feeding of the campfire to keep the flame alive. And so for me, for a painting that might take a year to actually accomplish, that's a lot of self-motivation to keep on believing in myself. So to the message in mentorship to other artists is keep on believing in yourself. So you get a message that's a divine mandate where you're like, I need to paint this thing. And you start painting the thing. And then maybe like you get bored, tired, restless. It doesn't seem like it's so much fun anymore. Sometimes you're like, I hate this project. Why? I'm so bored. Why am I doing this stupid project? But you have to keep going. You have to find the motivation to keep going and complete the thing. And so you have to create like inner milestones. You have to stay motivated with a sense of why you are doing this. What is your narrative story? Why is this important to you? You have to treat it like a marathon where you might be like, okay, like, just going to run 5 more miles and then I'm going to eat my granola bar. Like you might need to bribe yourself, encourage yourself. Like, how do you keep going through a long-term project? And not only do my paintings take a year, but I've been painting them this way, like pretty much since 2008 or so. So this is like many, many, many years that I have kept going in this way. So what I can mentor and inspire in others is like how to set yourself up for really a long-term career. Don't be like someone like Jean-Michel Basquiat. He's very popular. People know about him, but he was like a fast shooting star, like across the sky and then gone. And I don't want to encourage people to be that way, to, flame out and self-destruct. I want to encourage people to have a longevity of their career and to be able to keep going. And so what I've done is I have a very clear inner mandate of what I want to paint. I'm not influenced or inspired by other people. Like other people don't tell me what I need to paint. I tell me what I need to paint. And when I give myself an assignment, I do it and I bring it to completion. And when you are that disciplined with yourself and you finish a painting, so much energy comes back to you. Like, I've never run a marathon, but if you run a marathon, you're like, I'm really tired. My feet are tired. I have blisters. I want to stop now. But you're like, no, don't stop now. Keep going. And you make it to the end of the marathon, so much energy flows back to you that if you quit in the middle, you would never get that energy. So please know that when you follow your vision and you keep on realizing it, like making it real around you, you get to this moment where it's like, I remember what it's like when I put the last little dot of paint on one of my paintings, and then I put down my paintbrush and I'm like, that is it. Like, I want to say a bad word, like F yeah, F yeah, that is it. I did it. I did the thing. I did the thing. And you feel like so much energy coming into you that you're not like, okay, that's done. I'm never going to paint again. You're like, that was so amazing. And I'm so exhilarated. I can't wait to start the next one. Because then that's how I keep on going. That out of the excitement of the completion of one project, I bask in that project and it flows over me. And then I look at it and I'm like, well, that project is awesome, but what would happen if I turned this part instead of blue to red? And then what would happen if I made this part instead of 12 inches, 48 inches? And then what would happen if I did this? And it gives me the energy to then start the next project. And then that project for me is like my best friend. That project during the year that I paint on it, I'm like, even if the world might be going to hell in a handbasket, I know what I'm doing every day. I'm picking up my paintbrush. I'm going to get the right color and I'm going to put it in the right places. And that gives me a sense of security and sanity in a very, very insane world. So I would say to artists who are out there, or creative people who are out there, find a way to set up your creativity as your home base, where again, like no matter what's going on with your health, relationships, or craziness of the world, you're like, okay, I don't know about any of that. Just close the door, block it all out. I'm going into my creativity now and do that. And the more that I do that, and that I am centered in the sanity of my ongoing art projects, the healthier I am, the more emotionally balanced I am, the more resilience I have when I have to go out into the world and face the craziness. Because I'm like, okay, crazy, 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 crazy. I'm going back to my studio and painting. Like, that's the cool stuff that's going on there. So make it your oasis, make it your beautiful, safety, sane, happy, make it your happy place, and make it comfortable too. So in doing all of that, like this is all mentorship for like how to have a long career, how to be, if you're going to be a marathon runner, I don't want you to injure your knees in the first race and then be like, that's it, you're done, you're never running again. I want you to be like, wow, like that was just your first marathon. Keep going. That's your first medal. Like, here's your medal. Putting your medal over your head. Good job. Now, what are you going to do tomorrow? Well, tomorrow, take a day off. But then the next day, get back to training, get back to running, get back to it. Because for me, being an artist in this way, it defines my life. Like, I haven't really spoke, I think, in this sharing here today as much personally about how important artwork is to me. Like, I've talked about it as a cultural imperative. It's a personal imperative. I don't make artwork every day, but I try to. But there were times when I was very like medically fragile. Artwork kept me going. There were times when I had minimal physical resources. Artwork kept me going. There were times when my relationships with other people were really in the toilet. Artwork kept me going. And artwork is also my expression of like, what am I going to do on a good day? But it's like, it's a beautiful sunny day and everything is fantastic and perfect in the world. What am I going to do? I'm going to paint. And then what if it's like, it's a terrible day and the world is like going down the toilet and everybody is, crazy. What am I going to do? I'm going to paint. And that's it. You just find that as the truth of your being, no matter what is happening in all of these other places. And I think that is what it is to be an artist. Like, you're so much creating and sustaining your own world of pure creativity that there is a level of freedom and self-sustenance that you're just not defined by or destabilized by or limited by the things that are going on outside of your studio. They exist and they might percolate through and have an impact on you. But I guess the word is like you are powerful. You are the king or the queen of your own studio, and the canvas, that's your land. And you can do whatever you want to do in your land. And that is it's an exalted level of freedom. And so I want to encourage people because I spoke here like rather judgmentally, somewhat cattily about certain things. Be creative, paint turtles, make sourdough bread, do what is your thing. I am not judging you. I'm actually celebrating you, but I do have standards, but I'm celebrating you. All right. And don't judge yourself. Celebrate yourself.
I've never heard of anyone speaking about art in that way. It's so exciting. Um, you speak about in a very human term way. I see it as in the spiritual realms, you are crystallizing your soul in the ability to be a creator. That's like the gift of God, right? God made us in his image. What does that even mean? It's we can create like God. And I love that you say when it's all going to hell outside, just keep on creating because that is where we are in our true power, whether we're in this body or in some other realm. We want to crystallize that ability to be creative because that's literally the opposite of what AI is trying to do to us, right?
You got it. I'm hugging you. That's totally it. And so well said, so well articulated. It is the expression of divinity. And I'd say you're in training. Each one of us is in training to be able to be like God on a grand scale. So yeah, you begin with your canvas or begin with your sketchbook, and then being able to explore the levels of freedom and responsibility that happen from being able to create and joy. Like it's just so joyful to create and to explore. And I'll also say, like, not 100% of what I make is good. That's also like we can have a whole conversation, although we're wrapping it up. But you get the opportunity to edit and curate your own stuff because sometimes I have days where I'm like, I just want to make paintings and just do stuff and just be free. And it doesn't look that great at the end, but I'm like, that's okay because what I needed was just to paint and just to be non-self-conscious and just to make stuff. But I'm like, but no, like I will not be showing this to the world. And then you take the stuff that's good and you show it to the world. So you give yourself like total levels of freedom and self-expression, but you don't necessarily show everything to everyone. Like you get to have tons of curatorial control about what you actually share with the world. And so sometimes I do stuff that's like crappy or mediocre. Sometimes I make mistakes. And what do I do when I make mistakes? Because my medium is very unforgiving. So if I look at something and I'm like, oh no, I painted this color and it's supposed to be a totally different color. Like I literally have these little tiny razor blades that I can use to kind of like scalpels, like surgically cut away the wrong colors from the painting because I could not live with it. If it was on my wall and something was the wrong color, every time I walked past that painting, they're like wrong color, wrong color. Like I could not live. That's it. So I have very, very high standards. And if I realize that I made a mistake, I have to fix the mistake. And I think that that is a beautiful, direct, literal, not even an indirect allegory to what it is to be like a creator being on the level of God. Like I think that when you make a living creation or you're responsible for lives and ecosystems, you can't just be like, oh, I made it kind of crappy, but let's just leave it and move on. Like I think that you have to fix things if it's not right. And otherwise, you're going to walk past it every time and be like, I did not do that right. Like, I want to joke about like the platypus or something like that. Like, that's questionable. Like, I don't know about that animal over there, but it's here somehow. It's bizarre.
I love platypuses, so.
They're
Thank
pretty cool. Maybe they were intentional. Maybe they weren't a mistake. Maybe they're totally exactly the way they're supposed to be.
thank you for your time, Aurora. I can't wait to hear more about your upcoming art shows. And also,
Yeah.
are you still selling these? I only found out about this in person when you had your little shop at our event. So how
Yeah.
do we find these?
Yeah. Okay, I do still have them available on my Etsy shop. However, I will say that they are a limited edition that I I self-published them about 5 years ago. So I don't have that many copies made. So for people that have it, please know that it is a collector's item and people can still find them. And I think that if they sell out, I'll have to do second edition. So it's not the only time that I'll ever do this, because also those books only have my repertoire up to that painting. That's the painting that's on the cover. It's on my dress. And I've done several paintings after that. So it will need to have an update with the including the newer pieces. So it'll be worth it to do a second edition and maybe a hardcover. I don't know. Hardcover could be pricey. We'll see. So yeah, encourage people to buy the last few copies, and then we'll start the next self-publishing.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you for that information, Aurora. All right.
Yeah.
So happy arting, everyone.
Yeah. And let me just thank you, Lanley. Thank you for initiating this conversation. Thank you for your beautiful, thoughtful questions and beautiful interviewing style. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share so much of who I am as an artist with the people who are tuning in to listen to this.
Of course, my pleasure.